History begins with the events that developed in the Imperial Asylum, a place where many holy people of the Empire were born and raised. It was here that the buntered girl by the name of Bells lived. Some of the children regretted that he had been beaten, and no one had doubts about the fact that Belsha was guilty of this. The nuns considered this girl a walking nightmare, which were related to all the problems of the shelter. The nuns laughing at the girl that she dreamed of becoming a saint, although with her behavior she could immediately forget about it. As Belsa did not try to prove that the boy had started the first, no one believed her. Bells considered herself unnecessary. Moreover, the shelter was a different girl named Diana who possessed the gift of healing. She immediately approached the boy and offered her help. At that time, Diane, which was like a bright sun, was only 5 years old, and she was the full opposite of Belza. So they said that darkness was only needed to ensure that light could shine. The country in which the events developed was called the Era, the nation of the saints. And the aristocrats and the common people, they all godly created the goddess. The temples in which she was worshipped had an unprecedented power and prestige. The inheritance of Arius was inextricably linked to certain people, saints. In the shelter where Belsa lived, the saints were born, who gave the country incredible glory. All the children who were born there were the gift. The gift of Belza was healing, thanks to which it was considered a candidate for the holiday. However, because of Diana, no one but the candidate Belzi could not become. The girls were peers and got into the shelter at one time. Although their ability was the same, Diana was able to heal any wounds almost instantly, like holidays from legends. Initially, Belsa tried to get around Diana, and everything rolled on the day when a guardian came to Diana. Bels witnessed the conversation of the nuns, who discussed that the guardian of Diana wanted to become the Marquis Barillot's family, and rumored that it was they who left the girl in this shelter. The girls differed from each other as the sky and the earth. One was like the devil, the other to the angel. Bels did not compete with Diana. In addition, Diana was taken to the family very soon, and Belsha remained in the shelter. Very soon, Bels lost the gift of healing, so she felt her helplessness and felt unnecessary to anyone. But one day she was called to meet Duke Calos and his son. Balza could not believe that a child without a gift could be needed by someone, so she decided that as soon as the guardians found out that she had lost their gift, then they would quickly be disappointed in her and return to the shelter. Moreover, she realized that she, along with the gift of healing, lost the vision of a doctor who helped to see other people's illness. Bels did not even believe that she could be needed by someone. But the little Duke Edwin Calos has attracted Belza's attention. His black hair and the sharp look of golden eyes were very pleased with Belzi, and she wanted for a short time, but still live in his family. The boy looked like a prince from a fairy tale, which Bels read before bedtime. At the moment she first saw him, she forgot about everything in the world and was amazed at Edwin's incredible beauty. Bels pointed her finger on Edwin and said he would be her. The episcop took the head and apologized to the Duke for the behavior of Belza, and the Duke, noting that he was just a child, replied that they were taking a girl. Bels dreamed that she became part of the Calos family, and she was very mistaken. When she grew up, she witnessed the conversation of the maids, who discussed that no one wanted to come for tea through Bels. And although Belsla grew up and had a completely different status, it still remained a leader that no one was glad. And it was then that she witnessed a conversation about Diana, who recently cured the Empress. The maids were admired by Diana's ability, saying that such a holiday as this lady is born every 100 years, and therefore it is not surprising that Mr. Edwin has enlisted with a Diana, similar to a real angel. Balza was not going to endure these chats about Diana, from which she was already nauseous. Therefore, she grabbed the maid for her hair and shake her well. Bels screamed angrily so that they would never discuss Diana's dam again. Where Belza did not go, she was always pursued by Diana's shadow, and no matter how the girl was trying to climb above, and she never managed to reach such heights as Diana. Diana got everything she dreamed of. When Diana and Edwin got engaged, Belsa almost shortened her age because Diana even took her love. Bels believed that this damned Diana, and so there was everything that could only dream of. When the envy of Beliza crossed all the borders, one of the subordinates of the crown printer, who suggested to break the engagement of Diana and the Duke of Edwin, and also become a saint instead of Diana. Belzi reported that Diana's family had told the second prince and wanted to kill the emperor. The man stretched a well-sealed black envelope and said Bels would take it. Another man asked to leave the bottle and this letter in the Marquis house. Belzy seemed strange, but the jealousy blinded her, so she rejected all these thoughts and decided to act as she was told. However, her real goal was completely different. Bels was only a puppet that was used, but awareness of the girl came too late. By that time, Diana had already drank poisoned tea. Although Belsa tried to justify that she was not poison, but in fact no one believed because everyone was aware that Belsa hated Diana mostly. Bels was grabbed immediately at the crime scene, not even a chance to justify. The girl was sentenced to betrayal and an attempt to poison Saint Diana. Immediately afterwards, a letter was found in Belzy's room with a proof of conspiracy and a vial with poison, which the unknown people were handed over to Belza the day before, and this only worsened her sentence. Even then, Bels learned that all the evidence that the Marquis should be exposed and the second prince was changed so as to substitute Crown Printer and Duke of Calos. The Calos family is a large clan of heroes, which was distinguished by bravery in all wars and which preserved the old history of honor and courage, because of a stupid buzz of Belza, was deprived of the title and expelled from the empire. At the moment when the guillotine blade was already stuck in the neck of Belza, she realized that she was a minor heroine of the novella about the holiday who overcame all the trials. Unfortunately, Diana was the main character. Every significant person that Bels greeted during her life was only one of the huge harem of the male characters who were constantly surrounded by Diana. And Belza was only a minor thief who always interfered with the main character in search of love. In this world, everything was created for Diana. Dying, Bels realized that she was only a plot of the plot and very much regretted that she spent her entire life on hatred and anger. That's all she realized at the time of her death. But when the girl opened her eyes, she saw her little handles. Bels immediately ran to the mirror and looked at her reflection. She looked at her little Belsha of the time when she lived in the shelter. The girl thought that she was just guessed that she lived in the novel as she reborn. But in her past life, there were things that were significantly different from the original plot. For example, in the original novella, the fall of the Calos family did not happen because after the poisoning of the saint, they renounced Belza, deciding to defend the honor of their family. Belza began to think about why everything happened not as in the original story, and decided that her actions may have somehow different from what Bels did in a real novel. The girl thought that it is not cool. It was the cause of the fall of the Calos family. Suddenly, an angry nun flew into the room, who asked why Belsa was not dressed yet. The nun shouted that as soon as Belsa was dressing, he should immediately sit down for writing and rewrite the 10th head of the 6th scripture, and in an hour the nun will return and check everything. In addition, the nun shouted so that Bels did not forget that Diana had already finished with all the lessons and left the shelter, becoming part of a very famous aristocratic family. The nun continued to think about how it turned out that Diana's peers have not yet learned how to write normally, and what a big gap between the candidates in the holiday. Belza knew perfectly well that it was this nun who disliked her more. The woman continued to say that if Belsa decides to snap something, then she would come up with such a punishment that she would almost seem. Bels did not take her eyes off the nun, but shouted that she should not be staring at her and pouring a little girl so that Belsa fell to the floor. After that, the nun began to cough. The doctor's vision was a special ability of Belza. He allowed to recognize the causes of the disease, focusing on colors, and blue meant an incurable disease. In his past life, Belsa said the nuns. It was then that the woman did not like this forecast from a little girl, and she accused Bels of the fact that the scoundrel decided to pierce the nun because of her envy. But in this life, Belsha decided to do another. After Belsa said of an incurable nun in her past life, she was immediately closed in a punishment room, although the girl just told everything she saw with her gift. As it turned out, it was closed in this room for slander, and when the nun died, Bels was foreseen, the girl was closed again there without explaining the reasons. In 2 years spent there, Bels finally lost her gift. In the past, it was because of this that Belsha lost her most important ability, but this time the girl decided that everything would be different. Therefore, Belsha decided not to tell the monastery about her illness. Leaving the room, the nun ordered Belzy to rewrite the Holy Scripture to be something like Diana. The woman, threatening that she will return soon and check everything, left the room. Diana has always been obedient, and Belsa, on the contrary. There is 2 candidates in the holidays, and constantly compared to each other. It was so annoyed by Belsu that she behaved even worse on evil. Due to such rebellious behavior, many families did not want to take care of Belsa, and if Belsa immediately behaved differently, she would have got out of the shelter much faster, but she would prevent her from making her pride. The first holy Arya sacrificed her heart to the goddess to stop the spread of evil on earth. It was this in writing, and a girl, knowing him in memory, decided to quickly rewrite everything. Therefore, when I got to the case, Belsa began to record the transfer. But looking at the paper, she was very upset because there were only incomprehensible doodles on the white sheet. Initially, the girl thought that she could not write because it has passed very little time after her return. But how much she did not try. Her handwriting did not improve. Belsa decided that her mind could not synchronize with the baby's body. Moreover, she learned to read and write much later, when she was taken to the Duke of Calos. The girl was dissatisfied with the handle because she had nothing. And Edwin, on the contrary, encouraged Bels, saying that her writing became much better. At this time, the Duke of Calos came to the room. The boy asked his father to show Belsa because she tried to write it so much. And although Belsa was ashamed to show her doodles, Edwin persuaded her to do it. The girl has always been very sharp in her behavior because she felt uncertain. But the Duke and Edwin have always been near and never criticized Belsu, but on the contrary, reassured and supported the girl. It was thanks to the patience of men from the Calos family that the girl was finally able to open her heart and start counting them with her family. The Duke examined her regular attempts, said it was quite well-written words. The Duke put his hand on the shoulder of a little girl and said that if she training persistently, he would become the owner of the most beautiful handwriting in the empire and should not be in a hurry. Now Belsa remembered the words of the Duke and very much wanted to see them again. The girl wanted to apologize for her rudeness and boldness and very much wanted to thank them the same good and care. When the week after Belsa was degenerated, the shelter began to rumor that the girl had replaced. She became obedient, did not miss any prayer, and did not hear about the fights with her participation for a long time. Having made the decision to change her life, Belsa began with changes that could not be ignored. Therefore, the nun was very surprised when she looked at the empty plates after another breakfast. The nun said she could not believe that Belsa had eaten everything until the last crumb. The girl calmly replied that there was nothing special about it, although mentally noted that the taste was abominable. But the boy began to speak to the nun so that she would look closely, because he probably threw away the food somewhere, because she never eaten her to the end. Bells began to angry, though she tried to control her emotions. When the nun saw that the girl did not like it, she asked Bells not to arrange a fight in the kitchen. But the girl unexpectedly said that the boys saw how she ate. The boy was hiding behind the nun because he expected Bells to pour on him with his fists. But when the girl, smiling, said that the boy probably joked, he looked shocked at Bells. Belsa decided that she was waiting a long way, but she had to go with dignity to meet with the Duke of Calos. Therefore, a little girl learned to control her anger. And very soon a nun came to the room of Belsa, who gave the girl a very beautiful dress and said that Belsa immediately dressed. The girl did not believe her eyes because it was especially an outfit. The nun noted that the girl wanted to see a respectable guest and rushed her with dressing. Bells realized that such a dress was allowed to dress only with very influential people. Belsa recalled that she first met with Duke Calos in her past life when she was 7 years old and she had completely lost her gift. And at 8, he had already taken it into his family. Belsie was only 5 years old, and she knew that the Duke of Calos should not meet her so early, so the girl could not even imagine who came to her shelter. But when the door to the bishop's room opened, Belsa did not understand herself with happiness, because the Duke of Calos and his son Edwin stood in the room. These were the people whom Bells wanted to see for the most. Bells did not even expect that he would meet with the Calos family so soon, so she wondered why the Duke came for her right now, because in his past life everything was different. The girl decided that it is possible for the better, and fate gives her a chance to become part of the Calos family earlier. The only thing Bells wanted was to make a good impression on the Calos family. The girl barely held back her emotions and ordered herself to gather and do exactly as she imagined many times. Therefore, Belsa leaned in the bow and greeted the Duke and his son. The girl named her name and noted that she is now 5 years old and she has the gift of healing. The Duke looked at the little beauty and said that the girl had beautiful manners. When Belsa met with the Duke, she thought she had never noticed what warmly this man was looking at her. Therefore, the heart of Belsa began to crazy. The Duke also introduced himself and, showing the boy, said that this young man was his heir and his first son, Edwin Calos. The girl lowered her eyes and did not dare to lift her gaze on Edwin. She understood that as soon as she meets with him, she would not be able to control his emotions and would surely cry. And to do it on the first day of the meeting, she did not want to. When the bishop began to explain the reason for the Duke's arrival to the shelter, the boy asked to wait and approached Belza. He asked her whether she wanted to tell him something. But as soon as Edwin approached Belza too close and she met with him, Belz did not restrain his emotions and began to cry. She immediately remembered her past life and that she had to endure with him. Belzy gave a handkerchief and she, barely calming her cry, wiped tears sitting on sofas. Edwin was sitting next to her, from whom the Duke demanded to apologize to the girl. Edwin did not understand what he should apologize for, and where made a mistake. And Belz thought that only she made a mistake here, again with a fool at the first meeting with her new family. Belsa looked at her hands, and thought that her body did not have time to cope with the emotions that raging inside her. She was convinced once again that the baby's body is quite inconvenient. The bishop, meanwhile, apologized to the Duke of Calos for the girl's behavior, explaining that Belz was still very young and was very surprised when she saw a stranger. Everyone was aware that in the Calos family, iron blood, they know neither tears nor regrets. The Calos family was called the Iron Blood family, and the swordmasters were brought up in generations. The current Duke of Calos also had the glory of the sword demon and was an unsurpassed warrior. But Belz realized that she was crying at all because of it. Balza, in her experience, was convinced that the Duke's family was very good, and she realized it when they did not give up even such an unselfish girl, as she always supported her. The bishop advised the Duke to visit others, but the Duke replied that it is quite normal when a little girl was frightened by strangers, noting that there was nothing supernatural. The bishop added that, as he noted earlier, Belza is unlikely to be useful to the Duke, but the Duke of Calos asked not to speak so with the child because it is unacceptable. The bishop apologized. The Duke, meanwhile, added that as a bishop and it is known that for the Calos family this is the last hope, because the child that the bishop sent had not been able to help them before. Duke Calos added that if not his son, he would not notice the lack of progress in treatment. At that time, Belz guessed that most likely it was about the second son of the Duke of Calos. In those days, Calos' family estate was immersed in deep sorrow, because neither the help of the most famous doctors nor the most modern medicines could help their second son. Then the Duke turned to the temple as a last hope. The temple, having received a large amount of funds, sent to the residence of Calos Diana, which was located at that time at the residence of Marquis Bela. So even Diana, who had a well-known gift of healing, could not cure the Duke's second son. The boy died when Belzy turned 7 years old. By the time of the death of the second son, Diana regularly visited the Duke's family, and although there was a lot of time, Belsa did not understand how they already guessed that Diana did not help. Belsa recalled Edwin's first words when they meet, and the impression that the boy also remembers that they had already met in her past life. The girl was approached by the Duke, who said he had a son who was very similar to Belz. This boy is also very educated and restrained. Edwin, meanwhile, sat nearby and listened to his father carefully. Then Belz, not letting agree on the Duke, said that she knows whom the Duke was referring to because it was about Joshua. Belsa was surprised that the Duke wanted Belsa who would try to cure his wounds. The girl explained that last year she had already met with the son of the Duke, and she thought that she could not miss such a chance and should get to the Duke's house as soon as possible. In his past life, Belz used her abilities for many people, and the second son of the Duke was one of them. But that case went unnoticed and almost erased from her memory. And when Belza had an opportunity to thank the Calos family good, she immediately decided to take such an opportunity. The girl approached the Duke and asked if Diana could not help Joshua. The Duke confirmed Belza's assumption, and then the girl said that if they gave her a chance, she would do her best to help the son of Duke of Calos. Of course, Belsa did not believe in her own strength. She doubted that she would work out, even if Diana, who was much stronger, could not cope with this task. Edwin, having listened to Diana, noted that this fool was also asked for permission to help them. Then the Duke quickly told his son to keep track of his tongue when he talks to strangers. After Edwin's words in the eyes of the girl, tears appeared again, and the boy asked in surprise if she was gathered again, and did not understand that he had not said so much. The Duke sat in front of a little girl and extended her hand. He told Belga that if she could do such a service and go to their estate, they would be incredibly glad. The girl with tears in her eyes said she would gladly try to help their son, and thought that she was not even believed that their meeting had happened so before. Bels decided that she would apply all her strength to help the grief of the Duke of Calos, because she very much appreciated that the Duke believed in her healing abilities. The bishop unexpectedly said that he should say a few words Belzy before the road and ask the Duke while going to a carriage without a girl. Belzy did not like this idea. Hearing this, Edwin immediately ran to Belza and enclosed her with his body. He told the bishop that he was not suitable, and if he has a conversation, then he can talk to Belza with them. The bishop smiled insincere and said that he would take the girl for a short time, because he bears responsibility for her and wants to give some guidelines before the long road. The Duke said that they, of course, realized that Belzy needed some time to meet, so he suggested that his son go to the carriage, hinting at him that he did not interfere with the conversation of the bishop and the girl. Before the exit, the boy looked into the eyes and told her to run to them immediately if something unpredictable happened. Edwin said these words so confidently that the girl believed him. Belzy seemed to be trying to protect her in front of the bishop because she feels a danger from this man. Therefore, she assured Edwin that she would use his proposal. When the bishop took the girl to his office and closed the door, a friendly smile immediately disappeared on his face, and he said that the boy was not raised and confident in the brazen. The main bishop of Dunkuski immediately went to the case and said Bels that as soon as she got to the family estate of Calos, let her pretend to treat Joshua and then immediately return to the shelter. This man has always demanded to treat patients not to the end, so that people would come to the temple again and pay for continuation of treatment. The bishop, meanwhile, said that it was necessary to show the Callias who was chief here. This greedy and evil man always worried only about his own wallet, so he recalled Belzy again that she did everything he taught her earlier. The bishop was scattered and said that a disease that was not treated even by Diane, such as Belza, is definitely not on his teeth, so you do not need to scatter with empty words about his gift. The bishop poked his finger on the little Bels and said that she did not forget about her place and did not boast that she could not. After all, Dunkieski never believed in the power of little Belza. If Belzy fails to cure Joshua, then the temple will need to be returned some of the donations, and if Belzy succeeds, it will be confirmed that Diana's forces are not so great. Bels realized that the bishop did not want Diana's position to sway, and it would be much easier for the Duke to return part of the donation than to doubt Lady Diana's power. Everyone always argued that the Belzy had weak forces, and now they were preparing to accuse Bels after Joshua died. For the temple, the girl was only a coin. In the temple of Bels, no one counted the candidate for the holiday. They needed a cheap replacement of Diana because it was easy to use and easier to order it, and it is even easier to throw away when it was not necessary. But in this life, Belsha decided not to allow it to treat it. Therefore, the girl asked the bishop that she would be able to cure the son of Duke of Calos. The bishop changed in his face and asked how she decided to contradict him. He said he had the impression that the girl had taken possession of an evil spirit and should be put in a room for punishment. Bels immediately remembered Ismail, who had the same abilities as the girls. But when he was put in a punishment room and he spent a year there, the guy not only lost his gift, but also a voice. The bishop hinted that Ishmael also took possession of an evil spirit, and therefore the goddess took away from his disobedience to the boy, who was in his voice, and said that Bels did not forget about it. The bishop added that Bels was raised as a candidate for holy, so she has to behave properly, namely to do as her mentors tell her. In his past life, the girl has heard these words many times, but never wanted to obey them. She constantly spent her time in the punishment room, and the bishop repeated to behave obediently. The bishop constantly told the girl that once, and she can become useful to them as Diana. Belza naively believed the bishop, but this man never recognized the true gift of Belza. Of course, neither Belza nor the unhappy Ismail was obsessed with any spirits. Only the bishop was obsessed here. Today the girl decided to play him and said that she understood everything. Then Bels asked at His Holiness whether it was possible to go, and the bishop told her to move. Going out of the door, the girl said goodbye to the bishop, calling him instead of more holy, more baked. The bishop heard it. He became angry, blushed, and shouted that she would immediately return. But the girl who is the spirit ran to the carriage of the Duke of Calos because she was in a hurry to start her new life. Bels decided that she would not give any bishop's underground plans and would do everything possible. On the way, she said that she would make all the efforts for treatment and suddenly saw Edwin. The boy stood with his hands and asked why she was so long, because he had already tortured to wait for her. Belza was very glad that Edwin came to meet her, taking care of her safety. In his past life, Edwin has always disliked people from the temple, though he never told why. But he still got engaged to Diana as soon as it became holy, but it was probably because he really fell in love. The boy asked if the bishop did not give the girl something offensive. Bells, smiling, replied that the bishop asked her properly about Joshua. The road to the family estate, Calos flew unnoticed, because Bells was constantly thinking about later life. Kucher said they arrived, and the girl came out of the carriage. Belsa carefully examined the estate and finally became convinced that this look gave her strength and confidence that she was in her place. The Duke hurried to his sick son. The Duke apologized to the girl for not giving her to rest, but he would like Belsa immediately examined his sick son. The girl agreed to go to the room to Joshua. As soon as they went into the room with a sick boy, Edwin immediately approached his brother and took his hand. He whispered that they had already returned, so Joshua will not be alone. Joshua Calos was Edwin's younger brother and the Duke's second son. The boy suffered from an incurable disease through which his body had wounds that were constantly bleed. Belsa noted that it was quite strange when she saw a living Joshua, and she realized that their destinies were they similar. Therefore, Belsa asked the Duke's permission to examine his son. After the permission of the Duke of Calos, the girl approached the sick boy and lifted sheets. Belsa noticed that although the dressing was recently imposed, it was all soaked in blood. The girl concluded that the bleeding did not stop. But then she remembered that in his past life the boy died because of a cardiac arrest, not because of bleeding, so it seemed strange to Belzy. Belsa noticed the energy of orange that came from a sick boy. Usually it was a sign of illness of unknown origin, and in the past life, because of the loss of the gift, she did not see it. The girl realized that every time the boy was injured, his heart worked for wear, trying to restore and swing the blood that the boy lost very rapidly. Bells decided that first of all, it was necessary to treat the heart, not a wound. But when she looked at Edwin, she almost lost consciousness, because the boy came the same orange energy. The girl clearly felt the same stream, but weaker, and he left Edwin. Bells realized that the boy was sick with the same disease as Joshua. Therefore, the girl began to analyze all this information, gathering all the puzzles into a single picture. Bells came to the conclusion that both boys suffer from a genetic disease. And although she did not want to develop such events, she could not do anything. In his past life, they met with Edwin when Bells had already lost her strength, so she could not see anything like this. But now, thanks to the doctor's vision, the girl has opened the truth. Just in case, Bells examined the Duke of Calos, but she did not feel similar energy, which was quite strange. Therefore, Bells realized that the disease was passed through the mother line. The girl realized that energy, if left Edwin, is much weaker, so probably the disease is in a script. Therefore, Belsha decided that Edwin would be able to cure without problems. From Joshua, everything was much more complicated because all treatment was focused on wounds, not on the heart, although everyone should do it until it was too late. The girl realized that Joshua could last for a long time and his strength was almost exhausted. Therefore, Bells wanted to help the boy survive as soon as possible. Suddenly, Dr. Gordon and Lady Cast came into the room. The doctor said that they thought the Duke with their son was detained in the temple, and the men returned even an hour earlier than expected. The doctor explained that he was delayed because he walked after the herbs, which he used to treat the boy's wounds. The Duke thanked the man, and Gordon replied that he was his work because he was Joshua's treating doctor. But when the doctor saw a girl near the boy, he asked what she was doing here. Belsa timidly replied that she was trying to cure Joshua. Gordon noticed with his vigilant look that the girl was holding her hand over her heart, so he asked why Belsa reached there, because the boy's problem was contained in the wounds. Bels began to think that if she said that she was able to see the cause of the disease, then her gift would be known. But the girl would not want to know about the doctor's vision. But Belsa did not have time to decide how the doctor shouted that although Belsa and a child from the temple, he would not allow to touch the poor boy, as if she were allowed here. Lady Cast was immediately connected to Gordon. She asked in a harsh tone why the Duke of Calos led to their family estate that girl. Belzy seemed quite familiar to the woman's face. This woman was a special servant of the Calos family. The late Duchess was also served with a caste, which took away the servant from her parents' house. Cast was a personal nurse, Joshua. The woman did not ask pleasure whether the Duke was going to entrust her son's life to a girl whose ability is 10 less than Diana. But the Duke said sharply that the woman closes her mouth. The Duke added that Belsha was an important guest, whom he personally invited to his estate and asked in the future to pick up the words when the cast would speak about the girl. The woman immediately apologized. Then the Duke looked at the doctor and said that this girl could be trusted, because he was unbearable to watch his younger son slowly fades every day. The doctor gathered with his thoughts and wanted to deny the Duke, and Edwin, who stood with her husband, asked Gordon to stop because his father was right. Then there was nothing left for the doctor to agree with it. Then the little boy added, asking Gordon, "He may want to say that the Duke Cassios makes a mistake trying to save his brother." And the doctor immediately apologized. He said that he was wrong. Belsa caught herself thinking that even by her child, Edwin had a solid and strong character and was very similar to an adult from his past life, which he remembered for her. Then the boy looked at the girl and asked dissatisfied when she would start treatment. Belsa realized that she was rushing with Edwin was a futile thing and said she would start right now. In fact, Bells had already tried to release her healing power, and the ray, which contained the power of life and went from her hands, was so small that she was even ashamed. In fact, Bells felt incredibly great power within herself, which was fought by a huge stream, but only a thin ray came out. It was for this reason that her gift was weak in her past life. Belzy mentioned the words of Diana, who said that her gift of healing was much weaker than Diana precisely because Belsa believes less in the goddess. Diana advised Bales to pray more hard. Now Belsa realized that it was a very useful advice from Diana, and in fact she seemed very accurate to her. The girl had nothing left to trust the words of her rival. In his past life, Bells constantly cursed her destiny and gods, but now she has decided to completely change her attitude to the higher strength and mentally turn to the goddess Eri. Bells in her prayer said that the goddess sent her back in time to give a chance to correct her mistakes. Therefore, the girl asked to help her heal this sick boy. In her prayer, Belsa promised that if the goddess helps her, the girl would not hate Diana and would not interfere with her happiness with Edwin. And the miracle happened. Belsa began to radiate powerful energy. The girl felt an incredible force that escaped from the middle and filled the whole room. It was the impression that Belsa rose in the air and filled the whole space with its power. All present in the room did not believe in their own eyes. And when the healing energy emitted by Bielsa escaped from it out, people covered their eyes because they could not look at it bright light. Bels also felt her power, which she still did not believe, and immediately decided to take advantage of this gift to help Joshua. Bels approached the boy and sent her strength to him. No one in the room dared to move, and everyone directed their views on a stranger who tried to save Joshua. They were afraid to say the word not to interfere with healing. And when Bels finished the healing session, the doctor and assistant ran to Joshua because he did not move. They were worried that the boy did not worsen after this questionable procedure. The doctor immediately checked the condition of the little boy and examined his wounds. He shouted in surprise that the bleeding stopped and crusts began to form on the surface. The woman asked dissatisfied what it means. The doctor exclaimed that this means that the healing process and the energy of the disease that came out of the boy almost disappeared. So he can say that they managed to bypass the critical point. But the cast continued to rehearse that there was no point in this, because the young gentleman did not come to consciousness, so they had not to trust his life with an unknown girl. But the woman did not have time to arrange her phrase, as a little boy woke up and turned to his nanny. The doctor almost lost the gift of language when he saw this miracle with his own eyes. Joshua wandered his eyes as if nothing had happened, and in surprise asked why they all gathered here. The attendees were shocked to repeat that the younger son of Calos finally came to her senses. Bels also did not believe in this miracle and asked if Joshua really woke up. The Duke of this time came to his younger son and stroked him on his head. Edwin also jumped into his younger brother. Belsha did not dare to approach Joshua because she felt a stranger, though she was glad that she was able to cure the Duke's younger son and noted that the complexion had improved significantly. Joshua also noticed Bels and asked his father what a girl. The Duke explained that Belsha had saved his life, and Joshua said happily that his sister would come to him. Joshua thanked Belgi that she had given her promise, and the Duke asked what was being talking about. While the younger son explained something, Edwin approached Belza and said she needed to rest. Belsa tried to assure that everything was fine with her, and at this time before her eyes everything broke up, and the girl lost consciousness. It fell to the floor because for the first time she used all her strength at a time. When the girl closed her eyes, she moved to her place. Looking at, Belsa realized that she had been on the day they celebrated the birth of the goddess Arius. All children usually gathered for the holiday. It was considered that all the children received the blessing of the goddess, and every year after the day of her birth in the shelter was a feast, at which the children demonstrated their talents. Usually, on this day, Bells always fled into the forest and hid there until the end of the banquet, not to take part in this indicative performance, where it was always compared with unsurpassed Diano. It was on this day that Bells met with the younger son of the Duke and cured his wound. But she asked that the boy did not tell anyone healing and kept everything in secret. Even then, Bells realized that the cause of the disease was not in the wounds, so she told the boy that it would help him heal in another place. But when she sent her energy to the heart, she realized that it was too difficult. Until that day, Bells did not meet with such a complex disease. The girl did not have time to finish her business, as she heard the voice of Janny Joshua, who got upside down, looking for a little boy. Now Belsa remembered that when she was 4 years old, she was usually looking for shelter in the forest. It was there that she met the frightened and wounded Joshua and helped him heal. Before the exit, the girl promised that the next time she was sure to heal the boy to the end. Joshua constantly remembered the girl's promise, unlike Belza, who immediately forgot about their meeting. All this, Belsa remembered how she lay unconscious in her bed, and when she opened her eyes, the first one she saw was Joshua, who happily shouted that his sister had woke up again. Edwin and Bells started asking what had happened to Bed. Edwin explained that the girl had lost consciousness immediately after he had healed his younger brother. Belsa examined Joshua and concluded that his condition became much better, and the energy of the disease inside was much weakened. The girl thought that she had only to cure other wounds. So Belsa extended her hand to Joshua and said she needed to heal the boy to the end. But Edwin suddenly approached Belsa and took her hand. He said she didn't even think about it. Edwin said that the girl again left the nose of the blood and pulled her handkerchief so that she could wipe. Belsa tried to assure that everything is well with her and she just needed a short break. Edwin strictly said that she would not even think about Joshua's healing in the near future, because after the previous session, the girl was unconscious for a day. Therefore, he advised to think about himself first. Bells worried that last time she concentrated on the treatment of heart, which in general forgot about Joshua's wounds, which also had to be given attention. Bells worried that everyone may have doubts about her abilities, because although Joshua came to consciousness, the wounds on his body remained. Therefore, the girl said she should continue treatment. Suddenly, Bells was heard by the Duke's voice, who said Edwin was right this time, and Belzy needed to stop Joshua's treatment. The girl turned and saw that the Duke of Calos was sitting next to her bed. Bells lowered her head and asked why the Duke did not allow her to continue treatment, and was it because she did not cure Joshua's wounds. But the Duke assured that it was not. The Duke said that his son was not so cheerful since the last meeting with Belza. Although he told that the girl was curing his wounds and did not resort to details, saying that it was a secret. Then, the Duke said that they now realized that it was Belsa and healed Joshua last year. The girl analyzed everything and finally guessed why Joshua was waiting for her return. Belsh realized why in his past life the Duke's family took her under her wing after Joshua's death. Someone guessed that the boy was ill with a genetic disease, and then remembered his story about Bells. That is why the Calos family went to the shelter in search of Belza, and when they took her into their estate and realized that she had lost her gift, they treated her with love and did not abandon her. The Duke said that they would simply postpone Joshua's healing until the full recovery of Belza, and then, if she allows, he would ask to completely heal his younger son. The Duke noted that the girl needed a rest, because they were very scared when Belsa fell unconscious. Joshua also approached the girl and said that they were very happy to meet. Joshua added that he was waiting for Bells because she promised to meet him again, and now he did not want to let her out of the estate. But Gordon's doctor replied sharply that he was protesting against this idea. Duke Calos approached the doctor and asked in surprise why he was against, so that Belsa continued his treatment and did not make sure that she almost healed Joshua. The doctor calmly replied that the case was not at all in this, and he was incredibly impressed with the gift of this little girl, although to this day he generally doubted the talent of children from the shelter. Everyone was waiting for the doctor's explanation, and Gordon explained that Bezalzi could not continue treatment because such a great power of holy power can destroy the body. The doctor confidently said that after the loss of consciousness, this girl stopped his heart, and he himself became convinced that when he examined Bells, so because he was against it, so that she continued to heal. The frightened Bells looked at the doctor and could not believe that he was telling the truth, because the girl was even scared to imagine that her heart had not fought for a while. She was remembered from the past life, which Belsa spent in prison after the accusation of Diana Barilot's poisoning was no different from hell. The girl felt beating, famine, and torture every day. Calian Estart was the second prince of the empire. Then he held the heart of Belza, which was contained in a glass flask, and said that he did not even know what really meant the blessing of the goddess. Calian was surprised that they would not cut the poor girl. Her wounds healed instantly, and Belza could live even without a heart. He worried that if the temple had learned about it before, then Belz would be recognized as a saint. The man standing near the second prince asked him to be cautious in the statements, and Calian, having shook, said that in this case he had only to declare Belzi's sentence. The girl wondered why all these troubles fell only on her head, and she had to have such an unbearable pain during her life. But her suffering was to stop as she opened her eyes again. The girl opened her eyes in a new life, where she was 5 years old at the time and was very concerned because the heart may have been taken away in her past life and not returned during degeneration. And while Belsa reflected whether she had a heart at the moment, the doctor said that most likely a huge holiday energy in such a young body led to a heart attack, and he had already conducted some examinations. From the first results of the study, Gordon concluded that Belza's body is very weak, so demanding from Belza healing Joshua is equivalent to ask her to give her life. The doctor insisted that the healing was stopped, but Belza confidently said that she is completely healthy and is in excellent shape. Even if the heart stopped a little, now everything is fine. Bels was worried about the fact that in the case of healing, the condition of Joshua would deteriorate immediately and he would die soon. Therefore, she asked the doctor to ask anyone from the temple that no one was more energetic than her. The girl suggested that the condition of the heart of the lesser son of the Duke would be impossible to find out without her help, although Gordon understands well that the true cause of the disease is unknown to him. Listening to the girl, Gordon said on an increased tone that in the case of continued treatment by one fainting will not do, and she risks even to die. The girl assured that it would be more careful, and if she loses consciousness again, she will stop her attempts. The Duke followed their altercation and asked them to give them more time to make their decision. The Duke said that in the event of its continuation of treatment, if Belsa is in danger, they would provide her with the necessary support, and Belsa once again asked for permission to continue the treatment of Joshua. The Duke hesitated, and worried that his decision was optimally objective, so he said that Belsa was full of energy and asked Gordon to prepare all the necessary drugs. Of course, the doctor did not want to go to such risks, and he promised the Duke to collect all the necessary drugs that would help Belzi restore strength. The girl, meanwhile, asked to use Revius grass. Gordon grunted dissatisfied, asking whether a girl knows that this plant costs like a half estate. Then the Duke said that the doctor did not pay attention to the price, and the girl thanked for his care. Belsha decided that while the cause of Joshua's disease she understood, then another case should be resolved. Therefore, the girl asked the Duke's permission to examine his eldest son. Hearing this, Edwin approached Belza and said confidently that everything was fine with him, because he was examined every year. Belsa tried to explain that his brother is seriously ill and would not hurt. Bels explained that Joshua, his brother, and disease can be quite unexpected, so it is better to prevent it in the early stages. The doctor listened carefully to all Belza's arguments. While the children proved their point of view, the doctor suddenly asked Belza why she treated Joshua's heart, not his wounds, what they did before. The girl decided that the doctor finally began to suspect something, and she could use this chance to tell him about Joshua's real disease. So she said that the boy's bleeding never stopped. Belsa said that Diana could not cure scratches on his body, so she decided that the cause could be different. After all, in this case, all the load takes on the heart, which provides blood flow. But when the girl looked at the surprised faces of others, she realized that a 5-year-old girl could not know such words and tried to swim, saying that she saw it from the pictures of books that were in the temple. Gordon said that obviously medical support for his heart was not enough, and he also thought about this reason. and thought that Joshua was still so young that he could handle herself. The girl noted that Joshua's disease affects the heart, so it cannot restore blood circulation. In this case, Belsa wanted to emphasize that the heart is the main one in the boy's disease. Bells also added that the book said that heart disease was transmitted by heredity, which is why she was going to examine the Duke's eldest son. Gordon asked if she really implied that it was a genetic disease. Since the Duke's family was not mentioned, it is likely that the continuity is associated with the side of the late Duchess. The doctor bowed his head and admittedly acknowledged that he had no justification, and if he noticed the true cause of the boy's disease before, then everything could be completely different. But the Duke noted that everyone knows how the doctor tried to cure his son without sparing his own health, and now when the cause of the disease became known, the treatment will move much faster. Subsequently, the doctor still got the necessary vegetable for Belza, and she smiled, thanked Gordon. The doctor received the note of Belza and decided to examine Edwin more closely. So the end of the happy days of Belzy, which she spent in the estate of Duke of Calos. It seemed to her that it was only sleeping, and now she was standing near a carriage accompanied by a nun. The girl did not want to return to that hell, but the nun pulled her by the hand, saying that she would hurry because His Holiness had already waited. The temple specially sent this nun. Near the carriage, the girl turned and said she hopes the next time they meet, Joshua was already completely cured and they will be able to play with him. Thanks to Belzy, it was possible to find out the true cause of Joshua's disease and to predict his early death. Edwin will also be examined and will get rid of the disease in the early stages. Belz thought so. At the very carriage, Edwin was caught up by her, who asked not to call her a young gentleman because she had already called him by his name. The girl remembered that when she was unconscious, she accidentally called him Edwin. For such a familiar appeal to the aristocrat in his past life, Belz was hated by all others, and she apologized for this mistake. But Edwin said that she would continue to call him by his name. Belgy seemed to be goodbye to Edwin, and she went to the temple. Since recent events were absolutely not like in her past life, she no longer knew what to expect. The Duke wanted to talk to his son about the care of Belza, and Edwin was surprised to ask if this question was no longer resolved because Joshua became much better, because when he was treated by Diana there was no progress. Logan, the advisor to the Duke of Calos, intervened in the conversation, who noted that thanks to the treatment of Lady Diana, they managed to avoid several serious attacks of Joshua's disease. But the boy, looking at the man in his eyes, asked how the Logan could in this case explain the lack of long-term effect after Diana treatment if she has magical healing abilities. While Logan tried to think that to answer Edwin, the boy unexpectedly added that it was the Logan to be responsible for the budget for temple donations and very well come up with an excuse. As Edwin warned, the healing power of Diana ceased to be effective, and when the Calos family decided to continue treatment, Joshua's condition not only improved, but worsened. But in the temple, they explained that the healing force works only on those patients who remained the will to live. And when Diana stopped acting at all, it became clear that Joshua no longer existed. The temple interrupted all the attempts of the Calos family to continue Joshua's healing and, without shutting, planted the boy to death. Edwin constantly accused himself of receiving new wounds through him. The Duke tried to explain to Edwin that he was not guilty of anything, and Edwin failed himself for any Joshua's wounds. And when they returned from the temple, Edwin closed in their room and did not leave for several days. When the boy finally left his room and visited the Duke of Calos, he was very pleased that his eldest son returned to ordinary life and everything would be as usual. But everything was completely different. The boy's eyes were red from tears, and the hair on his head is squat. She pointed out that he was very concerned. Edwin confidently said that there is another candidate for the holiday in the temple, and they should try the last time. Edwin has always been extremely collected for his age, but from that day he has not left anything from the baby. Even in a situation where her younger brother's life hung on the hair, Edwin did not express any excitement. Logan said Joshua's condition is improving every day, but they have no guarantee that there would be no recurrence. He noted that they could periodically call bells by sacrificing the temple money. Duzo noted that although they became quite popular at their time, donations are simply so. But not better for their budget, just take the girl for care. He asked Gordon that he was thinking about it. The doctor said that the gift of healing Belza was very impressed, and even at the same time she showed good knowledge in medicine. Logan asked that it was a joke that a 5-year-old girl was doing something in medical terms. Gordon agreed that he also thought like Lauren until he talked to Belza. He was personally interested in the assumption of a genetic disease, and he had already sent a telegram to the Marquis Turbon doctor. The doctor stretched a letter to the Duke of Calos and said that as it turned out, there were cases of sudden deaths in the family of his deceased wife who were very similar to Joshua's disease. The doctor added that he is expecting detailed documents from the Marquis doctor, but they now have a course of treatment for Joshua. The Duke noted that he would not have thought of writing them, because the relationship between them was tense. Gordon once again apologized that the fault was completely lying on him, because he is their family doctor. The Duke said that the doctor thanks Bales better for the fact that they did not understand everything too late. And about the thought of guardianship, Gordon said that if they manage to combine Belza's medicines and abilities in the treatment of Joshua, then it will only go to him for the better. The only thing that alarmed Gordon is the look of a little girl, because she seemed to see people through. A child with such a great holy strength and liquid eye color was an extremely ominous prediction. The Duke, smiling, said that although Gordon considers Bales suspicious, the girl has already liked him, so he will still insist on care on her, because he had already decided everything. The Duke added that the girl was quite sweet, and he always dreamed of his daughter. Logan almost lost consciousness. Hearing as a demon of the sword, he calls someone sweet. Edwin, meanwhile, added that he most liked the girl's incredible eyes because they so brightly, and their unusual color reminds him of blood. Therefore, he will also insist on guardianship. As soon as Bels went to the bishop's office, he immediately said that he was known and asked the girl how it happened that due to her healing ability, the state of the Duke's younger son has improved. The girl explained that she did everything as the bishop said and just pretended to be treating. But the bishop threw a document to the girl and said that she explained how it happened that the Duke sent it to the temple. The letter stated that the Duke of Calos expresses heart gratitude to the temple for the assistance provided and asks for the following: to establish sponsorship over the candidate and to pass full custody over Belza, Duke of Calos. Further in the letter, it was stated that during the visit of Belza, it was found that the treatment of another candidate in the holiday, Diana, was ineffective. Therefore, they are asked to submit a complete report on the cost of their funds. Reading the letter, Belsa could not believe that the Duke of Calos wanted to take care of her, because they were already aware of the causes of Joshua's illness, and the girl had no urgent need for care. Belsa did not understand why it was the Duke of Calos, because he could simply call it for treatment. The bishop approached the girl and asked why she did not do the way he asked her. Belsa timidly explained that she simply used a part of the sacred force so that the Calos family believed, and she did not count on the healing of their younger son. Belsh added that she was in fact surprised that Joshua's wounds healed quickly, and probably the goddess herself made a miracle. But the bishop, not listening to Bells, shouted about which in the uncle the miracle was talking. The bishop's eyes began to shine with purple, and Bells, frightened, retreated back. The bishop shouted that Joshua had to get over, and Calos should have been despaired and sorrow. Belsa could not believe her own ears and thought that the bishop in fact wanted to give Joshua to die, and for this he ordered Belzi only to look, not to treat the boy in fact. Bels boldly shouted, asking the bishop wanted the boy to die. But the bishop said that it was a full delusion and added that every time Belsa opens her mouth, she does not go to say anything but lies. The bishop shouted that, in view of everything, Belza was obsessed with evil spirits and raised the guards to take away this girl. Belsha tried to justify himself, but no one listened to her. The girl was immediately pulled into the room and quit there, closing the play. The bishop said that only here she will be able to get rid of the evil spirits whom they took possession. The bishop looked, mocking the girl, and said that only in this way evil spirits could leave her mind, and during this time he would be able to demand forgiveness for her sins. With tears in the eyes of Bels, she asked not to leave her here, because she knew from the experience of her life that this place would deprive her strength and she will not be able to continue to use her healing gift. This room was in the depths of the temple, and its purpose was not to re-educate children, but to deprive them of their abilities. It was here that children who were unnecessary bishop and Belsa were closed in this room again. The girl remembered that the gift of divine voice, which was taken away from Ishmael, and her gift of healing from last life, all disappeared after they were kept in the punishment room for a long time. The girl's reflection was interrupted by a nun who shouted that it was time for lunch. The woman threw the girl because of playing a tray with food so awkwardly that the food was spilled on the floor. The girl decided not to take the risk of tasting this food, because she could mix a sleeping pill or some other potion that deprived children of magical abilities. Belsh said that the forces would last for 2 days, and if he had already sent an official letter to the Duke, they would definitely not leave her here alone. So she only needs to wait a little. Suddenly, Bells heard some spooky sound, but he seemed to her already familiar. Thinking, Belsa remembered that this sound was like that Diana taught in her past life. The room suddenly shone some magical runes in red, and Belza clearly heard the spells that were spoken in ancient language. The girl remembered this terrible feeling from her past life. It became clear that the bishop subtracts the magical abilities of children not with the help of some drugs that they mix in food, and all this is due to magic. The whole room was well designed only to absorb the magical power of the one who was here. It was a kind of trap, which was gone. The only thing Belsa knew for sure, that she needed to get out of here as soon as possible, because the longer she would be here, the faster she would lose the ability to heal. In his past life, Bells has lost not only magical power, but also the skill that allowed the use of any magical abilities. Bells screamed that she was in spirit, calling for help because she knew what it could have ended. But the girl's strength had enough for a short time, and soon the picture before her eyes began to burst. Belsha lost consciousness. Then Edwin appeared in front of her eyes, saying that she should not appear. Bels asked how he got here. But the young man quickly replied that there was no time now, and later he would explain to her. Edwin said he needed to pull it out of here as soon as possible. How many young people did not run away from persecution, and they failed to break away? Therefore, Edwin said that the girl would hide in the forest, and he would understand the pursuers and return. Before the exit of Beals, she snorted him by the hand and asked if he believed that she was not guilty, because she could swear that she did nothing to poison Diana. The girl began to cry and explain that she did not even know that the letter would be accused of treason, but Edwin only gently said to wipe her tears and take something. Edwin stretched a glass vessel where her heart was contained and said that she looked at him more closely, because it was an important part of the girl. The young man still advised not to lose his heart anymore. Bels shuddered from tears and held her heart. Edwin said he was enough to shake off fear because he is not known for his family members of the Calos family. But Belza said that unfortunately, she was not part of their family. Then Edwin said that as a gift for her 18th anniversary, his father prepared documents to admit Bels. The girl was so angry that she began to cry even louder. Edwin noted that Belsa has long become part of their family, so at that moment she should keep her head higher and be afraid. But suddenly, men's voices were heard in the forest. One of the men shouted that he found fugitives, and Edwin, looking at Belza by his hand, ran to the forest. He said that she would not stop and ran that there is a spirit. Bels obeyed, and gathering all her strength, ran after Edwin. But the pursuers quickly caught up with the girl, and one of the men, swinging up with the sword over Belsa, shouted that the treacherous kiss would die immediately. Hearing this, Edwin rushed to help. Edwin bravely covered with his body Bells a minute before the sword would pierce her body. Bells closed her eyes with horror, getting ready to meet death, and when she opened them, she regretted that she did not die. Bells saw Edwin, who kneel. In his chest, the sword of the pursuer protruded and the blood flowed from the wound. Bells screamed and rushed to the help of the guy. The girl tried to apply her magical abilities and whispered Edwin to last a few more minutes. The young people gathered around the young people who did not dare to approach them. But no matter how much the girl made, the bleeding did not stop. Belsa started screaming, asking why she could not stop bleeding. She anticipated that Edwin would die soon. Due to the helplessness of Bells, began to cry and tears dropped on Edwin. He extended his hand and wiped her tears. The young man asked her not to cry because he feels helpless. Having said that, Edwin smiled and Belsa felt that he stopped breathing. She tried to bring her lover to life, but she did not go out. Edwin was already dead. Belja leaned to Edwin's heart and realized that she was no longer beating. The doubt that Edwin was no longer left. He died trying to save Bells. One of the men shouted to stop Belsha and seemed to them immediately. But Bells was simply called because Edwin died through her, so she released all her magical energy, crying from pain. The magical power of Belza escaped from the middle and burned to the uncle all the pursuers who began to glow with purple before death, and Belza mourned her lover for a long time. Through the dream, the little girl called Edwin, and when she started to open her eyes, she saw his image. But as soon as the consciousness returned to Belza, she saw that she was holding the Duke. Seeing a familiar face, the girl felt safe and thanked the goddess, and that she would finally be pulled out of this damn room for punishment. She hoped that the Duke of Calos would save her. When Belza came to her senses, she realized that Edwin had only dreamed, and she is now in the Duke's hands. On the expression of the Duke's face, it was realized that the man was just mourning from rage. The hallway immediately appeared in the temple, who came to the noise and tried to understand what was happening here. Among the audience was the bishop, who was in a hurry to find out how the Duke of Calos appeared here. Belsh saw that the bishop's face was still a purple color, which meant that a malicious aura came out of her husband. The bishop, seeing the Duke, asked how he found himself here. Belsa thanked the goddess for her magical abilities, and she was pulled out of here. After all, she still saw with the help of her magical vision aura of people who glowed in different colors. Duke Calos strictly told the bishop that he had a whole bunch of questions, which he should deal with immediately. The bishop asked how the Duke learned about this place. The Duke looked at the girl and gave her a bag of potions. She asked the doctor to find her before the Duke of Calos' estate left. Belsa surprised her hand to her healing herbs. Now the girl realized how the Duke managed to find her, because she probably lost her bag with medicinal herbs as she was drawn to the corridor to the punishment room. The girl guessed that as soon as the Duke saw this bag, he immediately suspected something wrong. Meanwhile, the Duke said to the bishop that he did not expect the temple to be underground prison. The bishop was silent and did not know what to answer, and the Duke of Calos shouted that the bishop would hurry to explain, because he was already losing patience, waiting for the bishop to start talking. Finally, the bishop gathered with his forces and began to explain that the Duke of Calos was probably not so understood, and they created this place to expel evil spirits from children. Bells listened to the bishop, who said that last night Bells was in the Duke's estate, where, for all probability during the ritual, the girl of healing was taken over by an evil spirit. Then the Duke denied that even if it, and so, as the temple ministers can be so cruel to the child, especially with the candidate for the holiday. The Duke came closer to the bishop and strictly asked if the goddess did not be a monk to protect the one who was weak, and they, being direct servants of the temple, closed the baby in such a spooky place. The man reached for his sword and said that he seems to have an evil spirit, not a girl but a bishop himself, so he would gladly help to perform a ritual on the exile of the evil spirit. As soon as the Duke got his sword and lifted him to the head of the confused bishop, Pope Mantinus II came into the room and asked what was happening here. The bishop asked what the Pope was doing here, because everyone was aware that the Pope had almost never attended. But the Pope explained that he had come here to say greetings, because the candidate in the holiday was able to heal the son of the Duke. The Pope strictly asked what was happening here, because the Duke of Calos, who had to meet him, tries to kill the bishop, with everyone in the room a strange look, which should not be in the shelter. The bishop immediately rushed to explain to the Pope that this room was just needed to raise children and began to say that he was counted as one of the best shelter warders. The bishop began to list his best qualities, but the Pope, not wanting to listen, walked past him and headed for a little girl standing away. Pope Mantinus turned to Belza and asked if she remembered him. The girl thought it was just an incredible opportunity to tell everything she thinks about this shelter and the bishop. Belz looked carefully at the Pope and said that of course she remembered him, because she saw this man when she just got to the shelter. At that time, Belga seemed to be very, very long ago. After examining the Pope, Belsa realized that he did not come out of such a terrible energy as from the bishop. And Pope Mantinus II, meanwhile, asked the girl Bels to tell what was happening here. Still, Bels made the decision to tell the Pope to prevent the abuse of other children, so she started her story, saying that this place is called a room for punishment. The girl said that all the children whom the bishop counted disobedient. He announced that these children were obsessed with evil spirits and closed them in this room for a long time. Bels asked the Pope that she did not receive evil spirits and began to cry. The girl could not understand why she had tears, but she could not stop them. The Pope came out some incredible warmth, and Belzy became cozy and calm. The man put his hand on the girl's head and said that he believed in everything she just told him. The Pope then told the guards to immediately grasp the bishop and announced that he would now excommunicate him from the temple. The bishop shouted that he was not guilty of anything and asked the Pope to listen to his explanation. The Pope said that all the temple officials who were involved in the crime would be punished in accordance with the scripture. The nun immediately began to apologize for her sins. Mantinus II ordered to remove everything from this room and close it forever. He could not realize that such spooky crimes could occur within the walls of the temple. Belzy wanted to tell everyone that this room was designed to deprive children of their abilities. But she did not have almost evidence, so she decided to wait for it. Bels decided that after what happened here, the punishment of children would stop, and she was already advice. Suddenly, the Duke asked the Pope to hand over all the shelter documents to their hands. The Duke explained that they would give the documents of this temple directly to the Imperial Bureau of Investigation in order to carefully study what was happening here and the identification of all persons involved in this crime. The bishop immediately fell on his knees and began to apologize to the Pope, explaining that he gave him all his life to this place and they could not do so with him. Belsa did not take her eyes off the bishop. The girl thought that it was a lavish opportunity to find all the culprits that their children had taken away their abilities. The Pope, meanwhile, asked the Duke whether it was worth going so far, because it was the internal affairs of the temple. The Duke said that he would soon take this girl in full custody, because the document was already signed personally by the Pope, and he returned here to pick her up as amazed. The Pope smiled and said that he would not argue with the Duke and let him do with the documentation of this temple as it seems necessary, so he passes further investigation into the hands of the Duke of Calos. The Duke bowed in the bow before His Highness and thanked the Pope for his trust. Belsa mentally noted that the Pope was a very beautiful man, and a white glow that came out of the Pope that he had remained about 5 years of his life. When the Duke and the girl were already going to leave, Belsa asked the last time to talk to the bishop. The Duke was surprised to look at the girl and asked why she needed it. Belsa said that this man had been looking after her all these years, so she would like to say goodbye to him. In fact, the girl had to check something before her exit. Going into the camera to the bishop, the girl said she would call him simply by his name if he was no longer a clergyman. The man, hearing it, swore from rage. Due to her recent memories of his past life, Bells realized that Dunet's was the same energy as the knights who persecuted her and Edwin before his death. Then Belga managed to destroy them all through the holy power almost lightning. Therefore, the girl extended her hand and touched the priest's face. He shouted at pain, asking what she was doing. Until now, Belsa could not understand how it turned out in her past life, but in this she would try to do the same, because she should protect at any cost to protect the Duke and his family. The bishop began to rehearse with pain, and his face was covered with cold sweat. And Belza said that in fact the evil spirit was obsessed with him, not the children he deprived of magical power. The bishop began to shout to let him go, because he no longer had the strength to withstand it. When she ended and left the camera, the bishop fell to the floor. The confused guards began to ask what happened to him. Turning, Bells wished the bishop of a successful stay in the Bureau of Investigation, calling him, as always, the Holy Anthem. The girl noted that her ability, fortunately, did not go anywhere. The Duke asked how the girl said goodbye to the bishop, and Belsa said she was fine. But when the man touched her forehead, he felt that Belzy had a fever, so he hurried Logan to prepare a carriage. Logan suggested staying here and performing the rite of rapid healing, and Belsa said she did not want to stay here. The Duke took the girl in his arms and said they were going home immediately. When Bells woke up, the first thing began to consider the room in which she was located. The girl came to the conclusion that it was the same room that was in her past life. After the girl used a lot of energy, expelling the evil spirit from the bishop, she firmly fell asleep in the Duke in her hands and again scared everyone that she did not wake up for a long time. Then the girl decided that he probably brought her to this room, and she finally returned to Calios's family estate. Meanwhile, a maid came greeted with a young lady. A young girl of a pleasant appearance said that her name is Tara, and from today she personally made Belza. The maid also said she was pleased to meet the girl. Belsa remembered Teru, who had many younger siblings. Tara always transferred all the bolts and the severe nature of Belza with a smile, justifying it by the fact that Belsa reminded her of her younger sister. But in the past life, Benza for some reason decided that Tara belongs to her no better than others and constantly compares her with Diana. In the end, in the urge of pride, Bels released Teru from the estate. Only then did Bels appreciate how well this maid belonged to her. But it was too late. None of the other servants loved Teru because she always defended Bels and was constantly on her side. So now Belsha has decided to appreciate such a sincere attitude towards herself and also greeted her maid. Tara helped the girl wear a beautiful dress that successfully emphasized her unusual eye color. Bels decided that now the servants would not whisper her back, discussing her outfits, as it was in her past life. Tara said that the dress suits her and corrected the girl's sleeve. Tara paid attention to the girl's thin handles and noted that she was probably improperly looked after and very badly in the shelter for her children, because for her age, Belsa was too fragile. Tara said that Gordon said that the girl had recently lost consciousness, so he prepared new medicines for Belsa. Belsa was surprised to ask if she had heard that Gordon was taking care of her. Tara added that although the temperature was asleep, she heard that the little lady would often be unhealthy. The maid expected that this medicine would surely help Belzy and stretched the girl white powder. Belsa tried the medicine and said they were too bitter. Then Tara explained that the girl will have to drink them, because without it, she will not be allowed to treat Joshua, and Bels drank them to the end. Suddenly, Gaston's older maid came into the room, who was dissatisfied with Terry that she was ordered to send a girl immediately as she wakes up. Tara tried to explain that Gaston had previously asked the girl to take up to 3 hours, and they still have time. But the woman said dissatisfied that the young gentleman was already waiting, so it is better for them to rush. Gaston was dissatisfied with Belza from her head to feet, and said that in other circumstances she would not even let her on the threshold of their estate, so Bels should thank for the generosity of the Duke. Gaston reminded that once Belsa was in the estate for the sake of treating the young gentleman, she should do her best to prove the right to be in this place. Tara noticed the older maid, saying that it is impossible to talk to a little girl like that. But the girl said Terry that she was not wrong here because Mrs. Gaston is right. Lady Gaston was a personal maid of the young Duchess, and in the estate everyone respected and feared. Bels realized that she had the most careful to treat this woman. Therefore, the girl confidently came to Lady Gaston and said that she was ready to continue the treatment of the young master, so she asked her to take her to his room. And although Bels brought the Duke's estates, she did not want to lose this chance. The girl knew that Lady Gaston was not the best thought about her, so she expected that everything would change as soon as she cures Joshua. Lady Gaston cold replied that the girl would follow her and coat into the Joshua room. As soon as Belsa came inside, the boy waved her hand cheerfully and said he had already waited for his sister. Bels greeted her doctor and young gentleman, examining the boy's condition immediately. The girl was pleased that the condition of his heart did not get worse, and thought of herself why he was constantly calling her with her sister. The doctor also examined Bels and noted that she looks much better than the last time. The girl thanked the medicines that Gordon prepared for her and said she had enough strength and energy. Balza made a successful compliment to Gordon, which, thanks to his medicine, she completely recovered. The man, smiling, replied that another could not be, because he was not some ordinary pharmacist. The doctor said that he knew absolutely everything about the right treatment, so as soon as the girl feels bad, she should come to him immediately. Belsa thanked the care. Joshua intervened in the conversation, who said he did not like the medicine, but Bels assured that if today's treatment is successful, then a young gentleman will no longer have to drink any medicine. The girl said that if Joshua has a courageous treatment, she would ask the Duke for the reward for him. Then Joshua said he wanted one desire. Bels thought it was pretty sweet and was intrigued what would ask Joshua. She promised that she would fulfill his desire if the boy did not cry, and he gladly agreed to the conditions. Last time, Belzy managed to block the main source of the disease, and now it remains to remove the side symptoms of this disease so as not to allow a serious illness to penetrate deeper. The feelings that filled the girl reminded her the feelings she used on the bishop. Then Bels had already found the main cause of the disease and had a little more effort. But the unexpected to Joshua, Lady Gaston ran up, who greatly threw Bels and shouted to stop her immediately. The lamb asked, unless the damned witch sees that the young gentleman was hurting. Gaston immediately ran to Joshua and hugged the yoga, asking whether everything was fine with him. Gordon's doctor was shocked by the woman's behavior, so she asked if she did not go crazy, because Belsa was actually treating Joshua. Gaston screamed, asking why such treatment when a young gentleman suffers. Meanwhile, Bels rose from the floor and began to rub her buttocks with her hand, feeling that she hurt when she fell. Bels realized that in the treatment process, it could really be painful. But the girl remained a little bit until Joshua's full healing, so Belsa thought was that she failed because of Gaston. Gaston rehearsed the whole room, asking the doctor who would be guilty if something had happened to treatment with a young gentleman, and sat down that she had saved Joshua from unbearable pain. Belsa calmly asked the young gentleman how he feels now. The boy was silent, and Gaston again attacked Belsa with accusations that she almost drove Joshua into the grave. Then Joshua said that the wound on her knee began to felt and reached for her. Gaston delayed the boy's hand and said that the scratch bleeding could open again. but the boy still broke the bandage. When the bandage fell off and fell to the floor, the surprise of Gordon's doctor and Lady Gaston had no limits, because the wound on the knee of the young gentleman healed completely. Belge saw the doctor's reaction and mentally noted that it was just fine, and left only to convince Lady Gaston that her treatment is effective and convince the woman so that she no longer interfere. Therefore, the girl turned to Gaston and said that she could already see Belsa could heal the young gentleman. Currently, his condition has improved greatly, but they have only finished with the first stage of treatment. The girl noted that in the next stage she would need a stronger concentration of holy energy, and if Gaston had not repelled her before Belsa took away the remnants of energy, Joshua could suffer. Gaston launched her eyes and listened to a young girl silently, and Belsa continued to say that she sincerely hopes that Gaston would no longer interfere with the treatment process. Vyslukavši divčinku, Gaston spitala, jak vona smije tak z neju rozmowliati. But Joshua pulled the nanny by his sleeve and asked the maid if she really pushed his sister. Joshua said that Belsa only wanted to help him and reminded Nanny that she always taught Joshua that if he made a mistake somewhere, the guy had to apologize. Gaston lowered her head and said she realized that Joshua was referring to. Then the woman got up and strained through her teeth, which apologizes to Belsa for her behavior because she was concerned about the state of the young gentleman. Belsa knew that the woman belongs to Joshua as her own child, so she said that she understands everything and could promise that she was sure to cure a young gentleman. Only Gaston believed her. Gordon showed his incredible collection of medicinal plants and explained that the extract from blue fractures should help to strengthen the heart and enhance the effect of previous drugs. Belsa realized why the healing of the young master happens without much loss of her strength, and obviously everything goes so well, thanks to Gordon's miraculous medicine. So she said he was a real magician. Likar posmiknuvsia I buvradii, što divčinka ocenila yogo starania. Therefore, he said that all these drugs were personally composed by him, the best graduate of the medical academy. Suddenly the door to the room opened and Edwin came inside. He immediately went to his younger brother and asked how he was feeling and whether treatment was over. Bells felt uncomfortable in the presence of Edwin, so she scolded and lowered her head. She explained this by the fact that she may simply not expect to see the heir of Calos so quickly. Then Edwin asked how Belsa felt and thanked for his care, said that everything was well with her, calling him Edwin. Then she began to think whether she did right when she called it by name. Edwin smiled and said that he was glad that Belsa had heard to his request and they could call each other by name. Joshua ran to them and said he also wanted his sister to call him just Joshua. Edwin was surprised to ask why he called Belle's sister, and his younger brother explained that if a girl appeared in the estate, then she would automatically be a sister for him, and they began to argue which one was right. Belsa realized that Joshua spends all the time in the estate and never leaves it. From the opposite sex, he saw only maids, so he considers the girl his sister. Then Joshua said that when his sister Bels sisked him with his glow, his knee healed instantly, and Edwin would also be surprised if he did not sit in his class. Edwin was so surprised that he did not believe Joshua's words and asked the boy to show him his wounds. Belza, meanwhile, felt my back some unpleasant look, so decided to turn around. When the girl turned, she saw Madame Gaston with her look full of disgust looked at Edwin. The girl did not even believe, so she detained her gaze to look better. Belsa could still understand if such a view was addressed to her, because Gaston always disliked the girl, but she did not understand what the heir of Calos did not please her. Belsa noticed how the woman was barely holding on her immediately, and in the end, the dissatisfied Gaston asked Edwin why he was in the room of her younger brother at this time. Gaston noted that right now it would be necessary to undergo a workout on the sword, and a woman hinted that Edwin was already time to leave this room. Gordon also supported Joshua's nanny and said that the young gentleman was needed for rest, so they all have to leave him alone, because the boy has already spent a lot of strength lately. Vychodiachis kimnati, Belza pochula, jak Joshua yiyi poklikav. He said that his sister promised him to fulfill his desire if he was worthy of treatment, so it was time to keep his word. Belsa looked at Gordon and nodded that she could stay a little. When the girl approached Joshua, the boy said he wanted Bels to play with him. Gordon and Edwin were walking the corridor, and the doctor told the guy that he was really very busy with training, but always finds time to visit his younger brother. Edwin pojasniv, що un ogo bula pererva mіж заняттями zapitav. Чи дійсно Gordon приготував ліки для Belzi? The doctor replied that while he was preparing new drugs for Joshua, he decided to do Bales as well. Edwin said the doctor to take care of the girl because she had a lot of hesitance lately. The doctor noted that this girl is probably not indifferent to Edwin. And the guy, blushing, replied that Gordon had thought of himself and he was just grateful to Bales for treating Joshua. And if the doctor continues to speak these Niminatists, then he will go from here. The doctor noted that the relationship between Lady Gaston to Edwin had greatly worsened after they went with his brother for a walk and asked if it was worth noting the Duke. The boy and an adult replied that he did not need to bother his father because of these little things, because when his mother died, Lady Gaston, who served her all her life, was very sad for her. The boy was told by the Duke that Lady Gaston suffered greatly because of the death of the Duchess, and Edwin thinks that this is why she was so attached to Joshua, who was very externally like the Duchess. The doctor insisted that Madame's behavior was unacceptable to Edwin, but the boy lowered his head and said that Joshua was injured at that time because of his guilt. The boy said that he could understand Madame Gaston's anger, because of that wound his younger brother's condition began to deteriorate, so he understands why the woman was so angry with him. Edwin has not seen his younger brother so happy for a long time, so now he was glad because Joshua no longer felt such an unbearable pain as before. Belzie had to fulfill her promise, and the next day she came to Joshua to play. The boy wore family jewelry on himself and began to circle around the girl. Joshua talked about sapphires and emeralds, which glittered on it in different colors, and Bells encouraged the young gentleman, telling him compliments about his appearance. Then the boy showed his beloved heel of his mother, and said that he would be pleased to wear this jewelry, and as long as they are large in size, so he just gets a box and plays with them. Then the girl unleashed a small bow from her dress and tied the ring, wearing this makeshift necklace on Joshua's neck. She said he didn't have to wait for him to grow up now. Bells said that you could ask the Duke to make him a chain, but the boy hugged Bells and said he liked it. The girl realized that Joshua was trying to remember her mother, and while the children cheerfully measured family jewelry, Madame Gaston watched them with asparin. At that time, she was raging from the anger that this girl touches the Duchess. And then Joshua wore a diadem with a ruby on a girl and said she was very much like. Bells thanked for the compliment and they laughed fun, looking at each other. The children invented the names of fairy tale princes and played in how they met at the next secular event. But suddenly, Madame Gaston and Tara came to the room. Gaston strictly said that it was time for them to stop playing, and Tara, smiling, asked Mile to return to her room. Belza zrozumiela, що ніянці Joshua не сподобалась їхня гра. Joshua was stationed and with tears in his eyes said he would like to continue the game, but Belza, to support him, promised that the next time they would definitely play. The girl explained that she will now live in this estate, and they will have a lot of time for games. And then she suggested removing the jewelry together, so that the boy then had more free time. In the past life, Bells has never noticed that Gaston and Edwin exchanged some words, but did not even imagine that their relationships were so stretched. Bells only guessed that something happened between them before her arrival in the estate, and wanted to understand that it was actually the cause of such cold relationships between Nanny Gaston and Edwin. When Bells, accompanied by the maid, went to her room, she decided to ask the territories about the relationship between Edwin and Madame Gaston. She hoped that the maid would be open with her. But Tara was in a hurry, and then Belsa said she had the impression that Madame Gaston and Edwin were not very greeted, so she became interesting to her. Then Tara told that it all started with the day of the last walk when two brothers played together in the forest. It was then that Joshua wounded, and after that his condition deteriorated sharply. Madame Gaston always belonged to Joshua with greater love because he looked like a duchess, and after that a whole abyss was formed between her and Edwin. Now Belsa realized that in his past life, Joshua died after that walk, and Madame Gaston hated Edwin, although in reality what happened, Edwin was not guilty. Then Tara said that Belsa is very well, treated with the treatment of a young master, and so she thinks that very soon the relationship between Madame Gaston and Edwin will definitely improve. The maid suggested not talking on sad topics, and asked Bales to tell you better how she played from Joshua. The girl began to tell that they were playing with the heels that were in the box. Tara immediately changed in her face and asked if the girl did not touch the ring with blue stones. Belsa told that they played with this decoration and asked the maid, which is wrong with this heel. Tara said that it was a favorite ring of the late Duchess, so Madame Gaston is better not to know that Belsa had touched her. After all, it was the Joshua decoration that has never got out of the box to this day. A few days later, the Duke of Calos, together with Edwin, said Logan that they should go to the temple. The assistant asked, "Except for that shelter has not yet been settled." The Duke explained that they needed to sign some papers about the care of Belsa, and he first thought to go alone, and Edwin insisted that in view of the recent events, temples could not be trusted. When the Hertz was leaving, he said Logan stayed on the main. Tara immediately told Belzi and reported that during the absence of the Duke of Joshua treatment would be stopped. Tara wondered what Belsa would do in her spare time, and thinking a little, Belsa asked if she could not bring her pen and paper to her because she just decided to improve her writing. When Tara brought everything she asked Bells and left her alone, the girl decided that since the time she had fallen into the past, she had no free time to think about everything. Belsa reunited with the Duke's family much earlier than expected, and now had many things to treat Joshua. And she did not even have time to think about she sees her future. The girl recorded a list of cases that included to be kinder, to order those who caused the pain of her relatives, and not to die such a pathetic death as in the previous life. Belza had a crucial task, to find her heart because in his previous life it remained with Edwin and hide his absence to the girl more difficult every day. Belge thought where she had to start her search, how she heard some foreign sound and left the room. She asked in the territory of what happened, and the maid explained that they had guests. The room was angry with Madame Gaston, accompanied by other maids, and said that they needed to search, because the ring of the late Duchess with blue stones disappeared. Gaston also stretched the tape from the Belle's address and said she was found between Joshua and Belzy rooms, so the reasons for the search are more than enough. Another woman added that only Mr. and she knew about the ring. And after playing with a young lord and Belzy, it became known where the favorite ring of the late Duchess lies. But Tara tried to ask why Gaston was trying to blame Belston. Bells realized that none of the Calos family would dare to take a ring, so it is no wonder that Gaston was the first to suspect a stranger, so the girl decided not to interfere with the search. Belsa was convinced that she had to cooperate with Madame Gaston better, especially since she was not guilty. The girl opened the door of her room and said that they searched as much as it would be needed. The maids were immediately searched, and Bells stood in the middle of the room and remembered that after the game she accurately put a heel in a box, so he was pulled out after she left. The girl reflected who dared to steal the ring, and also tossed the ribbon from her dress near the Belzy room. And while the girl was thinking, one of the maids shouted that she found a ring. Anna's maid brought Gaston a ring to Madame and asked if she was the decoration they were looking for. Gaston did not take a long time to recognize the favorite decoration of the Duchess. Belge could not believe that this damn ring was found in her room. The girl almost lost consciousness and began to speak Madame Gaston that she did not steal this ring. But Madame Gaston shouted at Belzy, asking how she could explain that this ring was found in her room. The girl worn her heart and a cold sweat made because she could not explain it. Gaston asked what was making the Belza room of the ring, which was so fond of a young gentleman. Belsa made her hand to Rue's hand and thought that her affairs were bad. Belsa decided that she had come to an end, because it is not possible to prove that she took the ring. At this time, Joshua ran to the room and asked what was happening here. The boy was barely breathing, and the nanny ran to Joshua, asking why the young gentleman ran all the way. Gaston offered to go to his room immediately, worrying that Joshua did not get worse. But the boy pushed Gaston's hand and said with tears in his eyes that his sister had not stood anything, because Belsa himself made him a pendant to make the ring of the deceased mother from Joshua. Madame Gaston still managed to hug the young gentleman, and the woman asked the boy to breathe deeper so that he could calm down and restore his breathing. Anna, meanwhile, added that Belsa cheated on the young master. Anna added with a mockery that how it was possible to explain the fact that this tape was found in the hallway near her room. Belsa immediately grabbed these words and asked if Anna found this tape. Anna proudly replied to Bells that it was she who found the tape during cleaning, and if not her vigilance, then they would never have been able to find the steel heel of the Duchess. The girl boldly asked, as Anna realized that she was her ribbon, because everyone who saw that the girl tied her ribbon around Joshua's neck, Madame Gaston, Bells, and the boy himself. When everyone looked at Anna suspiciously, the maid smiled and asked if they seriously perceived the words of this child. Anna assured that she had no biased attitude towards Belsa. As soon as Bels wanted to explain why she did not trust Anna, the maid immediately said that she did not need to blame Belza at all. And then everyone heard the familiar voice of the Duke. His Highness with Edwin came into the room. The Duke ordered the guards immediately grabbed Anna, and they necessarily investigate the case to find out who actually stole the ring. The Duke said that he would personally conduct the suspect. Bells guessed that he probably witnessed their conversation if he immediately took the girl's side. Madame Gaston entered her favorite maid and told the Duke that there was no evidence yet. It is not necessary to accept rigid measures. She called to talk to her children to understand everything. Anna began to shout that any investigation would be superfluous because the ring was found in the Belsey room, so and here it is clear that she had stolen him. But the Duke strictly replied that if Belsa is not guilty, the real criminal would remain at large and will be unreasonably accused of a member of the Duchigian family, because this girl saved his son. The Duke noted that Belsa was already part of his family, and he personally recognized the girl. And Edwin advised Anna to pray to all the gods while the investigation is going, and hoping that the criminal would not be. Edwin approached Belza and, looking into Anna's eyes, said that Calos never forgive those who have harmed their family, and if her guilt is proven, then the punishment will be very cruel. While Madame Gaston tried to prove the Duke that Anna was not guilty, the maid fell to her knees and began to ask her. She broke up and, shining, prayed to spare. Anna said that every day she was hunted by tax collections and she had to steal this ring. The day before, she listened to a conversation between Gaston and Logan, from where she learned where the decoration was stored. The maid told that I was missing the ring very quickly, and she had to throw the ribbon near the Belsey room, and the ring was to be found during a search for a young lady's room. The Duke did not want to listen to further justifications, so he told the guards to take away Anna from here. The stunned Bells looked at the insidious maid and thanked the goddess that this time everything had gone. If the Hertz and Edwin did not go into the room, Bells did not even want to imagine that it was going on and what punishment came up for her because of the abduction of the Duchess's favorite heel. The girl was approached by Madame Gaston, who apologized to the fact that having learned about the disappearance of the ring, without understanding, she immediately accused Bells in theft. Gaston confessed that she did not even want to assume that the maid she knew for a long time was guilty. So she immediately accused Bells. The girl did not expect to hear such words from Gaston. Belsa thanked Madame Gaston for the apology, because it was quite unexpected from her side. The girl said she did not keep the insult on Gaston, so she suggested that nothing happened. But Madame Gaston firmly said that she fully pleaded guilty of what happened, so she cannot continue to be in this estates. Gaston decided to leave it immediately. After the incident with the abduction of the ring, Lady Gaston felt the burden of guilt on the accusation against Belza, so she decided to leave the estate, despite the fact that the Duke persuaded it to stay. Hugging Joshua's farewell, Madame Gaston said that if she remains here, she would continue to worry overly for the little one, removing him from communicating with peers. The woman explained that she considered all Joshua friends his threat. The same thing happened to Belza when she accused her without reason, although in fact the girl only wanted to help the young gentleman. But Joshua said that Lady Gaston was very sad for her mother, as he did. The boy learned about it when they played with the Duchess's jewelry, and he saw with which the nanny's face looked at the jewelry. Joshua said that it was by this reason that Madame Gaston and hid the ring, not allowing anyone to touch it, and if he knew that it would end it, he would never have got that decoration from the box. Madame Gaston hugged Joshua and asked him not to cry. She said she was incredibly glad that she had to worry about such a good and sincere boy. Before the exit, Gaston asked Belsa to take care of Joshua. Belsa promised that despite the fact that Gaston trusted Diana more, she would make every effort to cure the young gentleman. Gaston said that despite the fact that Diana spoke of the little power of Belza, she saw Belza's strength with her own eyes, and now Joshua may not worry about the fate of Joshua. Saying goodbye, the woman left the estate. After the words Gaston, the girl thought that it was now clear why she was suspected in the estate, and it happened after the statements she left to her. But why she said so remained a mystery. Joshua approached the frosty Belza and asked if nothing happened because the sister has been looking out the window for a long time. Belz replied that she just missed Madame Gaston. Joshua said he was also sad. Then Belz assured him that she would now spend more time with Joshua so that the young gentleman would not feel lonely. Then Joshua wondered that his older brother always lacks his time because Edwin is constantly in training, but her brother never liked how Joshua watched him. After the recent events, there were two changes in the Calos family. First, the ratio of servants to Belza itself changed, and secondly, another maid was appointed to Miss Gaston, who looked at Joshua. Belsha spent a lot of time from Joshua trying to finally cure the boy, and when she had free time, she always strolled the forest in search of a protected plant. No matter how carefully the girl tried to find pink leaves, but she did not succeed. Therefore, disappointing in search, Belsa settled on the grass, deciding that it is still far enough to enrich it. The source of her enrichment of beels was the phase grass, which she has been looking for recently. This magical plant was mentioned in the novel and was known for its incredible effect in skincare. In the novel, it was stated that phase grass grew in the possession of the Duke of Calos. But no matter how much Belsa did not try to find it, everything was in vain. Belsa thought that today she would also have to return home with empty hands. Sitting on the grass, Belsa heard the clanging of iron and remembered that there was a training platform near here. Then the girl made the idea at least one eye to see how Edwin trains. Smally, the girl decided that nothing wrong would happen if she watches, as the eldest son of the Duke was beating, because legends were already going on his skill. But then the girl heard his teacher saying that Edwin would never be able to become a real heir to Calos if he incorrectly holds the stand and crawls on a training platform like a snail. The coach approached Edwin and, shouting at him, asked how much he was repeated so that the guy would keep his right leg relaxed and cannot remember it after the 5th time. Edwin tried to explain that when the fight is relaxed, the speed increases, and when the duel with a stronger opponent, you need to take a stable position. Sun Zoriak was one of the best knights of the Duke and fought with him side by side. But after the injury, he resigned and became a personal teacher of Edwin in the martial arts. Sven shouted that it was not interested in anyone about the boy now, so he advised him to take his sword better and stand up to battle. Belsa was struck by such an unacceptable treatment of the boy. Sven brutally repelled Edwin's attacks and constantly forced him to climb without even resting. The man ordered him to stand up to battle and not think that the guy was already tired. Bells only heard Edwin's real slice during his workout, that he cannot be considered a true heir to the Calos family, and that with a leader like Edwin, the whole family will be threatened. Therefore, the girl was not going to continue to listen to the humiliation of Edwin and ran to the training ground. Belsa screamed loudly that Sun immediately apologize to Edwin and no longer treat him. The girl threw herself with his fists on Edwin's coach and began to shout, asking that he was knowing about Edwin's future, because this guy would become a worthy duke and bring her family to glory and prosperity. In the end, the notorious Sun was beaten by a candidate on the holiday and was immediately summoned to the Duke. Belsa put her lips and was sure she did everything right. Sven, smiling, said that the rumors of the fragile bells were full of lies, and he did not expect that the girl had such power. Belsa, in her turn, denied and said that Sun offended Edwin. Edwin was timidly saying that he specifically asked his father and Sen to conduct such a workout, because he wants to become stronger to protect people close to him faster. The girl became ashamed of her behavior, so she asked Seni, and were those words about an unworthy heir were also part of the training. And Sven, smiling, said so. Sven explained that he specifically provoked Edwin because in the midst of battle, emotions were covered with his head, and it was easy to lose the pace of battle. But his provocation was Bells, not Edwin. The Duke asked if Belsa ever heard of the detachment of the shadows. The girl replied that they were told in the temple that they called the Duke's people who stood in the order of the empire. The Duke confirmed the girl's words and said that it was. The Shadow Squad is the Duke's swords that act as if they are darkness, and many generations are their most trusted people. The girl asked why the Duke remembered this detachment, and His Highness explained that Edwin wanted to take part of the detachment under the condition if he was able to defeat Senyo in the battle. Now the girl realized what the words meant during the training, when Sven was constantly repeating Edwin that he should be more stronger in order to continue his father's business. The Duke said that it was for this reason that Sven increased the intensity of their workout. The man confirmed the words of the Duke, saying that a detachment of shadows was at stake. The Duke added that Sven was his faithful friend who has repeatedly saved him during fighting. He trusted him as himself, so the Duke asked Bells no longer to be angry with this man. The girl realized that the Duke trusted the trainer above all, so she decided to do her best to leave this unpleasant incident in the past. Bells got up and approached Sen. The girl bowed her head and apologized for her behavior, and Sven, smiling, asked if she never thought of becoming a knight, because she had a real talent. Suen added that today Belsa showed herself a fearless girl who rushed to the aid of Edwin, but sometimes the desire to sacrifice for others can lead to unfortunate consequences. Sven stroked the girl on her head and said that she would not make her loved ones in the future, and added, if she still changes her decision, he would be ready to train her. When the children left the Duke's office, Edwin wondered what the girl was doing on a training ground. He could not squeeze what things could bring Bells into such a distant part of the forest. The girl said that she recently read the plants and decided to see what plants were in the Duke's forest, but the boy wondered if she did not mean something specific. Belsa began to describe her fairy grass, saying that this plant has a pink heart, shaped leaves, and a very pleasant sweet aroma. Then Edwin wondered where such a plant could meet. Edwin said he probably knew where to look for her, and they went to the forest. When Belsa finally saw the right plant, she fell to her knees and began to shout with joy that she finally managed to find the fairy herbs. Edwin asked how valuable this plant, and Belsa explained, even Gordon does not have her in the collection. Then the girl wondered how Edwin found such a rare grass. The boy said that even before the disease of the younger brother, they very often spent time together, walking in the woods. It was during the next walk that Edwin was able to find this grass. Listening to Edwin's story, Belsa noticed that he had a fresh injury on his cheek, which she told the boy. He suggested that he was probably injured during a recent workout. Then Bells quickly approached the boy and said that he did not worry about anything, because she would now heal his wounds and he would be like a new one. But the boy immediately forbade Belsie to approach, and asked if she forgot how the use of her strength affects her body, and added that this scratch was not worth it to lose consciousness again. Belsa tried to explain that she was bad only when she was using a lot of strength. And now it is completely healthy, and you need very little for the treatment of such a scratch. Edwin said in a high tone that Belsa was always justified, saying that everything is fine, if in fact everything is the opposite. Therefore, he does not want to risk her health. Edwin thought and said that the teacher was really right when he said that Bells was too fearless and rushed to help without thinking about his own safety. The boy added that when she used a lot of strength and lost consciousness, she thought of how they would be unbearable to wait until she wakes up. Edwin noticed how the girl was scared, so turning away, apologized for his voice, but it was important for Bells to realize what he was in mind. Belsa asked timidly, except for he really worried about her, and the boy, Red, replied that she would never risk her own health again. After returning to the past, the girl tried to return the Duke of the kindness that he gave her throughout her life, and decided to give up full without thinking about herself. But now in her life, there were people who really worried about her health, so she promised Edwin that she would never happen again. And on that day, Bells realized that she was for whom to live. The Dr. Gordon put a bandage with healing herbs, and noted that although a detachment of shadows at stake, Sven is too cruel to train with a boy of such a young age. The doctor once again asked the boy if he was sure that such training should be continued. Edwin confidently said that they had been discussing everything for a long time, so you should not return to this topic. Belsh saw with her own eyes that Sven was bent during his workout, so she also worried about Edwin's safety, although of course the boy was more visible that he was in priority now. The doctor called the girl and said she would extend her hand. When she fulfilled his request, Gordon put a package with a medicine in his palm and said that they were made from a religion plant which the girl asked for. Belsa thanked, and the doctor reminded that he spent a whole bunch of precious plant for its manufacture. The girl cheerfully said that she also had something much more valuable to the doctor than a relic. Gordon said that at his age, the girl was already surprised by a well-known doctor. But when Belsa began to solve the bag, Gordon asked what it was for the aroma. Gordon shouted that he knows only one plant that has such an unforgettable smell, and it is a fair grass. Belsa had fun with her head and replied that the doctor was right. In his past life, Gordon had the same hobby. He has collected a variety of herbs from all over the world, but in his collection there were several empty places, and one of them was intended by the grass of fairies. Edwin asked if it was so valuable, and Gordon began to explain that it is an extremely rare plant that affects the skin of the face so that it becomes better than in the fairy. Gordon described all the healing properties of this plant and its frantic cost. Belsa, meanwhile, told the doctor that she wanted to grow a fair grass. The doctor looked at the girl in surprise. Gordon noted that it is impossible with such a small sprout, because the seedlings would swell before it starts to bloom. Then the girl asked if they had more such grass, whether success is possible. The doctor asked where the girl took this rare plant. But Bells replied that it was their secret, and if the Dr. Gordon does not help her, then she will be mute as a fish. The doctor shouted to wait for the girl, because he did not refuse her help, but simply said it was impossible. Gordon said if the girl gives him a little more information, he can change his mind. Belsa was glad that the doctor got to her on the hook, and cheerfully told that she found this plant in a city where there was a sunlight, and there was an old tree nearby, and asked if this information would be enough. The doctor reflected the conclusion that this plant is most likely a parasite, because there was neither light nor water nearby, and asked the next time Bells to grab a bark of wood and soil with him. The doctor wondered why the girl will breed this plant and how she is about to use it, because it tastes very bitter, and it is simply impossible to add a fair grass in the tea. It was for this reason that Diana made aromatic sachet in the original history of Diana, and since it took a long time to create it, Diana managed to make only a couple of bags. But Bells has already decided how she could keep the smell even with a small margin of herbs. She only added that it was the secret of the firm, and now she cannot share this information with Gordon. And while the dissatisfied doctor thought that he did not particularly want to know about her further plans, as the girl stretched a proud bag and said it was a gift for him. The surprised doctor looked at the girl and asked if she really gave him this invaluable plant. And Belsa, smiling, said that it was a gift in the form of a bribe, and now they are accomplices with him. Edwin approached the girl and asked if she was sure that he needed to give the doctor the grass of fairy, and Belsa clearly that they could gather at any time. The doctor did not understand himself with happiness, and, running around the room, assured the girl that with his knowledge and experience, they would be able to plant this grass the whole garden of the Duke. The girl was glad that with the problem of breeding a rare plant, everything was solved, because she was convinced that Gordon would do everything possible to achieve maximum success in a short time. In this world, there were medicines, doctors, and even magic which saved incurable patients. But there was no thing that all women of the world would like. These were drugs that slowed down aging and looked after their skin. The girl has already invented that she will start a business on cosmetology, where Gordon will be the chief doctor, and she is a director. When Gordon asked if she would not tell her this plant, Belsa said no. The doctor said that if they managed to breed this herb at home, it would be a grand breakthrough in medicine, so he did not say if Belsa told where the grass grows, things would go faster. Belsa reported that she would tell everything as soon as the plant can grow. She knew that the grass would grow in 3 months, so she decided to keep her natural location secret. Tara came into the room, who said they were so open that the whole estate was standing on their ears. And it is not clear to whom 5 years, but to whom 65. Then the maid said that the Duke was waiting for Bells. Hearing this, Edwin said that he would also go with them, because he has a conversation with the Duke. But the maid denied that His Highness wanted to talk to Lady Belsa alone. Edwin looked at Taru in surprise, and she calmly explained if Edwin had something urgent, he could pass it through it. Belsa was also intrigued, which I would like to speak alone with her. The Duke in his office was just reading a book. When a maid came into the room, who told him that she brought to Lady Belsa as he asked, His Highness told the girl to enter the room. When they were left alone, the Duke said that the girl would not worry because the conversation would not be about the incident with Sun, and to be honest, the Duke planned to do so later, but changed his mind. Clicking on one of the books in his library, the door opened in the wall, and a secret passage opened in front of the girl. The Duke said Bells followed him because he wanted to introduce her to some. The Duke's estate has always had this secret passage, but from the past life, Belzy has never managed to find out. Meanwhile, the Duke took her in his arms, and together they began to descend steep steps. Taking a girl in her hands, the Duke explained that it is quite dark here and she can stumble, but if she is against it, he can put her on the floor so that she goes on her own. The Duke's hands were so cozy and safe that the girl decided to take advantage of his proposals and thanked for his care. The Duke smiled, and Belsa realized that he was not as cruel as she thought before. The Duke explained that this secret passage is leading to the feud, which only members of the Calos family have access. His Highness said that for centuries their people have participated in religious wars. And then the Duke added that the ancient trophies of those years are stored here. The girl managed to see the arias, with the help of which the first holiday won the demonic creatures and the ring of the dark cult of heretics. The girl read about all these trophies in old manuscripts, but did not understand why the Duke decided to show her all. Meanwhile, His Highness stretched the girl of the Plushev Medveja and said he gave him. The Duke explained that it was not just a toy, but an artifact created by a secret cult that he had made his souls into various objects and added that he would be her defender from that day. Holding a plush Medwez, Belsa did not understand how this toy could protect it. The Duke watched the girl's reaction and waited for her question. Turning Medvez in her hands, Belza said that from which side she does not look at her. It's just a toy. But the Duke denied, saying that it was only necessary to write it with holy power, how everything would change. His Highness explained that as soon as the girl does it, the bear will immediately become her loyal guard, as well as a symbol that the girl is under the protection of the Calos family. The Duke asked her to do the same as during Joshua's healing. She realized that his High specially gave Medvez to her, worrying about her safety, and although she never did such, and would try to justify his trust. Touching her hand to the toy, Bels began to share her holy energy with him, and later realized that this Medveja was just pulling her magical power. Bels was amazed that the toy absorbs her strength no less than Joshua. Therefore, she hesitated and did not know what to do, worrying that she could lose consciousness again. The Duke also noticed that the girl was concerned about the consequences, so putting her hand on her shoulder, supported Belsu and said that she was in no hurry and assured that he believed in her. Belsa tried, and everything turned out. The Duke praised her for the fact that contact with the toy is now established, but Belza said she had not changed from Medvedik. Then the Duke reported that he needs to be named. Thinking a little, Belza said that he would be named Sam, and as soon as she spoke her name, the Medveja came to life, and having made a slings, said that he was now a girl's personal defender. From that day, starting with Medvej, the Duke began to cut the girl with gifts. He argued that it was only a symbol of the Calos family protection. Even His Highness immediately relocated Bels to the best room. And also the girl constantly received new accessories, dresses, and even exquisite furniture, which every day brought to her a servant, and for a few days a whole bunch of gifts have been formed for a few days. Looking up the mountain of new things, Belsi thought with fear, when it would all be understood. In order not to get confused under her feet, she decided to take a walk but did not know where. Joshua was on cardio training today for heart strengthening. Gordon was occupied by plants. Then the girl decided that there was only one place where she could go. The girl noticed a butler who carried a basket and asked where he was going. The man explained that Edwin is currently training with Sir Sven on a training ground and he goes there. The servant noted that soon there would be a lunch break and asked if the girl would not help him to carry his basket with food. Bels replied that she would be pleased to fulfill this assignment. On the way, Bels thought that no matter whether Edwin really wants to lead a detachment of shadows and training with Sun was still in a hard shape, and looked as if Sven was just mocking Edwin. Belsa soothed herself only by the fact that the Duke would never allow Snin to cross the line, and still fears of the girl remained. Looking inside, Bels asked if there would be a break soon. Men were still trained, and Belsa almost lost consciousness when she saw that Edwin and Sun were beating real swords. The coach, as always, humiliated the guy and did not give him rest. Sven asked if the guy had lost all his strength, but Edwin said confidently that he was not. Then Sven said that there would be no pardon in the true battle of the enemy, as if Edwin would not be pleading about it. The coach stressed that the weak commander is sure to sacrifice his subordinates in battle. Bels understood when Sun lost control, he attacked any opponent, not understanding who before him. Edwin noticed that Bels came to the training platform, so he was very worried that Sven did not notice. He understood that this could not be allowed, because the consequence could be unpredictable. Sven asked Edwin why he stopped and stanzas dug. The man suspected that the boy was distracted by someone, so he asked if someone was behind his back. Edwin was frightened that Sven would turn and see Bels behind him, so he exclaimed the fast, asking if Sven, who saved his father in that year battle. Sun was shocked by this question, so he asked that the guy was mean. Edwin recalled that the coach recently spoke of a weak commander, so he thought it was addressed to the Duke of Calos. This topic was special unpleasant to Sen, so Edwin was expecting until the coach would focus on him. Belsa would be safe, and he will, in the meantime, finish this sparring. Sven looked at the boy and asked if he was so sure of talking about the same in the middle of the duel. The coach noted that Edwin's pressingness did not occupy. Sven said if the guy wins in this duel, then he will answer this question and transferred the heaviness of the body to the left leg. Edwin immediately realized that the coach would attack. And while the boy planned how he would repel Sven's attack, he noticed that the coach had thrown somewhere to the side and suddenly, turning around, ran the other way. Edwin immediately realized that Sven knew about Bels from the beginning. Edwin shouted that Bels would immediately run and ran after Sun. He understood that the distance was increasing every minute and not catching up with a trainer who had an advantage. Son, that the spirit ran to Belza and shouted the boy that there is another important point that should not be forgotten. One who is too confident in his abilities would never protect the dear people. Belza saw Sun approaching her with a sword in her hands and could not move her horror. She realized that she had to run, but her legs did not obey her. Here Sven was already nearby and swung the sword over the girl. Belsa closed her eyes and covered her face with her hands, anticipating a deadly blow. She had already said goodbye to her life, and suddenly, someone's hand covered her from a blow. When Belsa opened her eyes, she saw that the Duke was standing with her sword in her hands near her and just successfully reflected Sven's attack. Then His Highness asked that Sven was just about to do. The angry Duke asked who he was going to send to his sword. Sun began to try to explain that he was not going to cause harm to this girl. Sven said that the Duke himself should know that he would never dare to cause the damage to Bells and sent his sword so that everything was safe. Edwin exhaled with relief, noting that the danger had passed. The Duke noted that if Sven's intentions were not serious, it was not necessary to do so inadvertently. Edwin immediately went to Belza and asked how she was feeling. The Duke recalled that Sven's body was not as it was before. The coach intelligently asked how His Highness could say so, because he became so only because he defended the Duke himself. Belsa saw that in these words, Sven began to get the same negative energy as from the bishop. Edwin, feeling bad, covered Bells with her back and said that she closed her eyes. Sven began to say demonstratively that the Duke had destroyed his life and even had the urgency of mocking his injury. He was angry at the Duke and for throwing him a gate in the form of this Sharkash. The Duke noted that Sven had lost control, so he advised him to go to rest and cool. Belsa noted that Sven became very second men and probably kept in the soul of the image on the Duke. But Sven shouted that today he reflects more sober than when he finally finished the case he was preparing for so long. Suddenly, the man got a sharp knife and rushed at the Duke. The Duke immediately envisaged the attack of the enemy and defended himself in time. His Highness was shocked that his best friend so treacherously attacked him. The boy immediately grabbed Bells and covered her with his body. He was very worried about her safety and was ready to protect her at the cost of her own life. And the shocked Bells could not understand what was happening here at all. Meanwhile, Sven skillfully lifted his knife out of the floor, and while the Duke of his attention to look at the children, he rushed at him again, shouting loudly so that he was finally breathing. The Duke grabbed the attacker's hand skillfully, and squeezing her firmly, said that he gave the last chance of Sun so that he would be ashamed and apologized. And then the Duke promised to forgive him. But Sven exclaimed that even if the Duke and forgive him, he would never change his mind and devote his life to make the Duke to suffer as he is. Then the Duke realized that there was absolutely nothing left of their friendship, and he did not even suspect what the enemy was near his son. Edwin, meanwhile, said Belga that everything was already over. When the girl opened her eyes, she saw the dead Sen, which lay on the floor, and a Duke with his sword in his hand stood next to him. She could not understand why Sven attacked the Duke. Edwin called his father because he was fully immersed in his reflection. The Duke, as soon as possible, apologized for witnessing such a terrible scene. The Duke said that the children were most frightened, so he asked them to go to the estate and relax. The son stretched his father with a note and said that he found her in the room in Sanaya the day before. The note stated that the father appreciates his child most, so let the one who deprived you of everything feel the same pain. With this note, someone sent Sen for the murder of Edwin, who knew about it in advance. The Duke was struck by Edwin's courage, who already knew that Sven was about to kill him and still continued to go to his workout. The father watched the children, holding hands, went to the estate. Belsa cultivated Edwin's wounds, explaining that he had forbidden her strength, so if he could not treat the wound with a scar. But Edwin said that the scars were only decorating a man. The girl was looking for appropriate medicines and complained that Gordon was not at such the right moment, and then she asked Edwin if they could stop Senny on their own. The boy wisely replied that the disappointment of Sven would not lead to anything good and he would have to break down once, so unfortunately it happened right now. Belza asked why in this case Edwin did not change the coach. Edwin said that his father was obliged to live with life, because this man was his combat companion, and most of all in the world he was proud of his master of a sword, who sacrificed himself for his father. That is why the Duke has long descended Swan's rudeness, and Edwin decided that he could simply endure when he would end, because he was sure that his workout with Sun would have come end. The boy said that only now he realized that his successes had drawn even more, and someone used his weakness, pushing Sinao to betray. Edwin said that Bells was at all to nothing, and if it did not happen today, then soon this story should come to an end. Therefore he asked the girl not to blame herself. Belzy was also a pity Edwin, and she was proud of his courage at the same time. So she hugged the boy and said that if something like this happens next time, he must tell her about it. Edwin was ashamed and carefully squeezed from the girl's embrace. He, lowering his eyes, promised that he would do as she asked, and the children confirmed their agreement, holding the little fingers. The boy decided to distract Bells from this topic and asked if the Duke had not given her this Medvedik. The girl asked how he learned about it, and Edwin replied that his father had already shown him this toy. He wondered if Bells managed to activate his guard. The girl told how it happened, and then the guy wondered if she tried to use Bells to use other Medvedik's modes. Edwin realized that his father had not had time to tell it, so he reported that this toy has regimes of the guard and warrior, but his most beloved is a giant mode that is useful when you need to climb high. Bells wondered where he knew everything from, and Edwin said that a real heir should have all the information. And then the boy ran out on the bed and offered the girl a little sleep. But when Bells wondered, the heir had no other things. The guy pulled her by his hand and said that they were only the children who received a whole bunch of horrific injuries today. The girl climbed on the bed and said that he behaved so only to reassure her. And Edwin, closing her eyes, said that she would hold her mouth on the castle when they are already going to fall asleep. Closing her eyes, she thought that she had fallen in love with Edwin since her past life was very good for her since childhood. So they fell asleep, holding hands. It has been a few months from the moment of Belza's moving to the Duke's estates. All this time, she treated Joshua, spent the evenings with the Gordon doctor, who carefully recorded the results of treatment. The girl began to be counted as a full member of the family, and her life was fully adjusted. Everyone was kind and asked constantly how she feels. But one day, looking out the window, Belsa saw an unknown crew. She immediately remembered all the plans for today and noted that they did not expect any guests. And while Belsa was thinking who could be, a butler came to her, who said that the visitor had arrived at Belza. Belsa looked shocked at her husband and could not understand who came here. But the Bogretsky, warning the girl's questions, said that a visitor from the Barilo family and her name is Diana. This was even more shocked by Bells, because there was no particularly friendly relationship between them. The maids immediately rushed to dress Bells, and when the girl had the most fashionable dress, she was covered with compliments. Bells did not understand why it was so expressed if Diana first came to Joshua. In fact, the reason for Diana's unexpected arrival was that she learned of Belza Joshua's healing, so she came to the boy apologize for failing to do so. Bells said that Diana's strength is much more than her, but the baby's body is very fragile, so there is always a chance of failure. Therefore, Bells did not understand why it was worth apologizing. Tara said that Lady Diana asked for a personal meeting with her childhood girlfriend, that is, with Belza, and explained that it was because of this that they wore the best outfit for the girl. The girls have not seen each time as Diana got to the Barilo family, so Belsa decided that in this life you can use this chance and become the best girlfriends. Standing in front of the door of the room, which already had Diana, Belsa felt a strange anticipation, so she began to be nervous. But she immediately ordered herself to take her own hands and build her new life as he should. And when Diana allowed to enter and Belsa stood on the doorstep, she was confused and did not know where to start their conversation. She turned various options in her head and continued to look silently at Diana. Belsa decided that at first she would need to apologize to Diana, but she did not have time to plan her further actions as Diana rushed to Belza and squeezed her in the arms. Belsa was surprised that despite the fact that she was constantly insulting Diana when they were in the shelter, Diana did not keep her evil on her and also wanted to establish their relationship. Belsa regretted that she constantly offended such a good girl, and Diana meanwhile asked the maids where the cake they bought personally for Belza. Diana took the goodies that they were specifically dropped to the best pastry to please Bells with this dessert. The maid also noted that Diana was very worried before meeting with Belza. The maid Diana added that the girl was very much asked to buy this dessert because she was convinced that Belsa never tasted anything like that. Tara immediately put Diana's maid in place, saying that their estate is working the best chefs, so they of course do not buy food for takeaway, and now they will have the opportunity to try something new. She also said proudly that they had just the tea they purchased in the imperial estate, and she will now brew it to taste Diana and appreciate this exquisite taste. Bels did not understand why her maid so started to the words of Diana's maid, so she asked to brew tea to them. When the girls were left alone, they sat silently opposite each other. Bels never said anything but the image, so she didn't know where to start their conversation. Still, she decided to start with an apology, so she said she had to say something to Diane. Belsa said she was sorry for being bullied by Diana in the shelter and wanted them. But she did not have time to prove her phrase, as Diana interrupted her and said that she was worried about Bels. Bels looked into the eyes of a girl who was sitting opposite, and she did not leave her a strange feeling that Diana had been interrupting her specifically. She tried to figure out whether it was true or she just appeared. Belsh asked why Diana was worried about her, and the girl explained that she had heard the conversation that Bels was being held in this estate because Diana failed to cure Joshua. Diana said she had told the Marquis Bela that Bels had taken away from shelter just to cause Diane's guilt, and Diana and the Calos family pretended that Belzy managed to heal Joshua. Then Diana looked into the eyes of Bels and added that the treatment was actually failed and asked Belza whether it was so. Belsa immediately realized that the so-called girlfriend was trying to provoke it. Belsh thought why Diana had to, and could not believe that such a sweet and good girl was able to bring Bels so insidious to emotion, so she didn't even know what to answer. Belsha replied that she is of course not as skillful as Diana, but she still has her ability, because it was not for nothing. But Diana immediately asked why Bels fled the festival in honor of the goddess, and she had no doubt that the girl did this because she was not sure of her own. At that time, Bels thought that she fled that day because she was not compared to Diana, because it was just unbearable. But she couldn't say it in Diane's face. Therefore she was smiling. Bels replied that she escaped from the festival because there was a terrible boredom, and she could not carry her because she was always a hooligan. Belsa added that she actually healed Joshua, and as treatment was not instant, she lives in this estate to observe his condition and continue treatment. But Diana still wanted to get the answers that she would like, so when he asked Belza, she did not find her Duke in the punishment room, and because he became a pity Bels, took her to himself. Belsa knew that he was obsessed with his reputation, so each of the children who got into the punishment room forced the oath of silence about what was happening there. Therefore, all other asylum pupils, and especially Diana, who was obedient, had to know anything about that place, and Bels asked how Diana learned about it. Diana said that a knight came from the imperial palace once to the Marquis Bela and asked her a large number of questions, and then she learned about the detailed crimes of the bishop. Bels caught herself thinking that the Duke once said that the Bureau of Investigation would carry out this process openly, but they decided to keep a complete secret of the existence of a room for punishment. Therefore, something in the words of Diana did not come together. The girl, meanwhile, said that Bels is now under the patronage of the Duke himself, and is very pleased with her girlfriend from the shelter. Bels did not leave the thought of where Diana learned about everything, and why she behaved so strange. Diana, meanwhile, asked why Belsa got bored and offered to eat the cake to improve his mood. Belsha decided that she just did not notice such details in her past life, and Diana was always like that. And then she suddenly noticed the glow of yellow in Diana, which said that the girl has an allergy. Since the glow was too small, it did not carry the danger to life, and Belsha decided to simply remove the allergen from the table. She just didn't know what Diana was allergic because she had never denied her sweet before. Diana said that she is glad to meet their meeting, and in fact not often eat sweets, because the Marquis Bela is constantly emphasizing that it is sweet harmful to health, so it is restricted in desserts. Meanwhile, Belsa said intensely that in her past life, Diana was definitely not allergic to everything that stood on the table. Therefore, she thought what could provoke a girl's reaction. Then, Bels heard Diana to say that the taste of this dessert was simply incredible, and looking, saw that the girl was biting a piece of dessert. Belsa shouted to stop Diana immediately. But Bels did not have time to treat, as she saw that the girl began to breathe and the glow, which spoke of allergies, began to shine even more. Diana released a piece of cake that fell to the floor. Bels could not understand how the fire could grow so instantly and rushed to the aid of Diane, trying to force the girl to spit out that damn piece of cake. Diana began to reflect because she did not know what to do in panic. Bels realized that the airways had already started to swell, so she tried to pull a piece of cake from her mouth as soon as possible. Belsa asked that Diana immediately spit out that piece, as her maid Lily, who asked what was going on here, flew into the room. Belsa shouted that she was quite in time, because Diana had trouble. But the maid, running up to the girls, hurt Belsk so that the girl fell to the floor. The maid screamed, asking that Belsa lets herself from their lady. While Belsa came to her senses, lying on the floor, Lily rushed to Diana, asking what happened to her. Diana almost did not breathe and began to turn blue, so the maid, without a joke, did not know what to do. Bells came to her senses and began to climb the floor, as she heard a familiar voice. She lifted her head and saw Edwin, accompanied by her maids, came into the room. Belza looked shocked by people familiar to her and could not move because her body became too weak. Lily, screaming, asking Belsha and why she did so with Diana. Bels immediately thought that Diana was specifically poisoned, because this scene reminded her a scene from her past life when she was surrounded around her finger and accused of Diana's poisoning. Belsha, as in her dream, repeated that she was not her. Edwin immediately approached the girl and, hugging her, said she would calm down. Belzy really became calmer when Edwin was nearby. But Diana's maid screamed that there was a spirit so that Bells did not justify herself, because Diana has all the signs of poisoning and indicates that Diana poisoned Diana. The maid rehearsed that the doctor was immediately called to the room, because she was worried that Diana could die. Edwin, meanwhile, kept Bells for his shoulders and said that he believed that she was not guilty. The boy turned and, looking at the maid Lily in her eyes, said that she was following her tongue, because she would have to be responsible for accusing the member of the Calos family of poisoning. Edwin immediately asked the territory or checked the food for poison, and the maid said that, of course, before the tea, everything was checked and nowhere and no hint of poison. Belsh looked at how Edwin was trying to protect her desperately and thought that now, as in her past life, Edwin is trying to do everything possible to prove Belza's innocence. But the girl decided that she could not count on the help of Edwin all her life, so she approached Diana's maid and firmly assured that the girl was allergic. Bells approached Diana and began to release her magical energy. The maid Lily shouted that she was going to do now and explained Belsa, if you just look, Diana could die. Bells explained that swelling could spread instantly, and due to the shortness of breath, Diana would not be able to breathe further. Therefore, the maid agreed that the girl would provide her first aid to her lady. Bells realized that allergies were an autoimmune disease and could not be cured to the end, but still decided to do everything possible to help Diana to stay alive.